All you, Russ.
Okay, 7:04. Let's call to order and have a flag salute. Kick it off.
I
Pledge
pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Great. All right, do we have a consent agenda for the Planning Commission minutes for November?
I make a motion we accept them as presented.
And a second.
I'll second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, they are passed. Okay, do we have any topics from the floor that's not on tonight's agenda?
Okay, yeah, we have a lot of folks out there, so this is the opportunity in the meeting if you want to talk about something not on the agenda, if you have a concern, if you have a praise, something like that, and either raise your hand or put a comment in there saying you want to talk. And if we don't hear from anybody, we will go to our first public hearing. And I am not seeing any takers.
I don't see any.
Audrey's back. That means we are ready to rock and roll. With some hearings.
All right, it's now 7:06. Conditional use permit at 164 South 15th Street. All right, the public hearing is now open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a conditional use permit. Subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 5600 and 5701 on map 4N1W-4AC. The applicant is Josh Harper. The owner is Dolinuk Family Trust. Because the quasi-judicial proceedings require observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict of interest bias in this matter? Seeing none, does any member of the commission, Okay, does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Hearing none, Jacob?
I do not see any comments to that effect. Nope.
Yep. All right, generally in order of proceeding will be as follows. Required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by the applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations and decisions. The following statements are required to be made in the commitment of the hearing pursuant to the City Code ORS 197.7635. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.100.040, 1A-F approval standards. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.100.150, C, automotive and equipment, body repairs, light equipment. All testimony and arguments and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as a comprehensive plan or land use regulations such as found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional and other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, and failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue and precludes any action for damages in certain court. All right, Jenny, is that you?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also seeing weird annotations on the share screen. Do you guys see that too? The lines? Yes. Okay. Someone has an iPhone and maybe is accidentally making some marks. I'm not sure how to stop that. So, oh, here we go. Disable annotation for others. Okay. Yes, so tonight we're in the Holton Business District. We have an application for a conditional use to do some automotive repair and occasional sales. You may remember this building because it was most recently used as the brew facility for Columbia County Brewing. So Columbia County Brewing was in this building off this property, but we're focused on the parking lot for the former CCB building and the former brew facility. Can you guys see my cursor too?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the former commercial building that we're looking at tonight, before it was a brew facility for CCB, was used as a transmission shop. So it's already fairly set up for automotive repair, and so is the parking lot. So there aren't a lot of conditions just because we've got an existing site. So the site itself, and before moving on, you know, this is in Holton, so automotive repair is a conditional use. That's why we're here tonight. The site itself is made up of 2 different lots. These have been consolidated, so they cannot be sold separately. So they have a restrictive covenant on them. One of the lots has an existing building of about 3,200 square feet. And then the other lot is developed with head-in parking on one side and then a drive aisle on the other. It's all already paved. And this is the CCB that you may remember going to for beer and food. But we're going to focus on this building here. So the property has access on both 15th Street here and on 14th Street. Previous uses kind of indicate that there used to be drive-through, so you would kind of pull in and then pull out on the other side. There's an existing developed driveway apron on the 14th Street side and sidewalks. On the 15th Street side, it's a little bit weird. There aren't any curbs that separate or delineate the driveway approach here, but there are sidewalks. It's just kind of one of those older standard sidewalks without a curb. So like with all conditional uses, we just go through our criteria of approval. I've highlighted in red where there are questions for the commission and things to consider for tonight. So we'll kind of just go through this. So the first is that the site is an appropriate size for this type of use. It was used previously as this use, so there's no indication that it's not the appropriate size. We'll talk about off-street parking in a little bit. The characteristics have to be suitable for the proposed use. Again, you know, there's no indication that this parking lot's not suitable in drive aisle width. You know, this is an appropriate width. It's 25 feet wide for 2-way traffic for head-in parking. So there's no issues there. It's already connected to city utilities and it's got developed streets on both sides. So there's no issues with adequate capacity for the system to serve the parcel. So moving on to the zoning district. Vehicle repair, service, and sales is a conditionally permitted use in the Holton Business District. The applicant isn't proposing any outdoor storage for this site. If any outdoor storage related to vehicle repair was proposed, a separate conditional use permit would be needed since they're not proposing any now. And it's also important to note that outdoor storage alone is not a permitted use in this district. So you could only store things outside if it was related to the use. So there's some conditions of approval in there about making sure we don't have outdoor storage on this site. The maximum lot coverage for all impervious surfaces is 90% in the Holton Business District. And I'm going to scroll to a new photo next. So remember this area where my cursor is. This is kind of the area for impervious surface on the site. And it's also the area where I focus on some landscaping improvements. I also note that vehicle sales as a principal use is not permitted by this conditional use permit. We want to make sure that there aren't two separate principal uses, so the vehicle sales are sort of incidental to auto repair, which is the primary use here. We'll discuss a little bit later in the parking section about how we can maybe limit that to make sure that it's an occasional thing and not, it doesn't become a car dealership, for example. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the staff report and show some photos of the site itself. I wish these annotations would go away. I hope they're not bothering you guys as much as they're bothering me. Okay, so here's where things get interesting. So there's a specific section in our conditional use permit chapter that talks about setbacks specifically for automotive repair. And that's what this little code section talks about. So a minimum of 5 feet in the perimeter of setback shall surround all outdoor parking and storage area. And this area should have buffer screening, which means landscaping of various heights. And so, you know, given that the applicant's working with an existing site, there's some flexibility there, but this is what the area that I pointed out on the site plan currently looks like. So there's some existing vertical bamboo, but this impervious area really could use some help. There are no shrubs, it's mostly just weeds and low-lying grass. And so to help meet this screening requirement around the parking area, the commission can decide to require a mix of shrubs in this area. And so that's what this little red section is talking about. This is the other side of the parking lot. So there's an existing planter, which was probably intended to meet some kind of screening requirement in the past. It doesn't have any landscaping in it currently, and it's also pretty dilapidated. So I think the commission should consider requiring a new planter in this area to add some vertical shrubs to help screen the parking lot a little bit on that side and soften the amount of asphalt. And as a note, if this were a new parking lot, screening would be required. And so this is certainly within your realm to require some additional landscaping on this site. We also have screening requirements for trash enclosures. The applicant is proposing a new trash enclosure on the 14th Street side. They proposed a 5-foot high fencing. I don't want to scroll to it now because it'll take some time, but we need a 6-foot screening around the trash enclosure, so that's a condition of approval. So parking. So we've got an existing ADA space, but it was originally intended to serve the CCB facility. And so it's not located on the closest route to the automotive repair shop. And so the commission needs to decide tonight whether restriping and relocation of that ADA space is mandated. Given that they're not doing a lot of other site improvements aside from maybe landscaping, restriping of an entire parking lot may not be warranted. This is also a building code issue, so we talked to the building official about it, and he basically said, since they're not proposing any structural changes to the building, he would not be triggered to require removal and relocation of the ADA space. And I'll just scroll to the site plans to show you that distance. So the existing ADA space is here. And like I said, it used to serve this building, so that was obviously the most accessible route. And without relocation, someone in a wheelchair would park and then traverse the parking lot and go to the man door on the side here. And this is all paved and an adequate width for a wheelchair. So that's just a question for the commission to consider whether an entire restriping is necessary to move that ADA space closer. So the number of parking spaces. So you may have seen there's kind of this smoker loading zone. Before they used to have their barbecue right here, their smoker. And so this was blocked off as no parking. They need a minimum of 7 spaces. So in order to get that, this loading zone can actually accommodate 2 additional spaces. And so they would actually have 8 on site if they were to change that loading zone back into 2 new parking spaces. And this is important because our code talks about how required parking spaces for a use should not be used to store vehicles related to that use. And so if they're planning on storing a vehicle that they want to sell, for example, that extra space that they can accommodate would make sure that we're not creating a burden for customers or employees who are trying to park in their parking lot. So if they have a couple of vehicles for sale, it wouldn't create overflow parking off the site. So the question here is, does the commission want to limit the number of auto sales to one at a time just because they've got that one extra parking space for the vehicle if they stripe this into two? So that's something the commission should consider. There's a condition in there about requiring wheel stops. The existing wheel stops on site were sawed in half logs, and so they've been rotting. So wheel stops along the parking lot is required. I mentioned that there's already an existing walkway here to get to the building, which is adequate for ADA access. One thing in our site development chapter is crime prevention. And we noted that there's no exterior lighting on this side. And so if they're going to have a screened refuse area right here, we should probably have some lighting for at night, because that could be used as a place to maybe hide. And so that's a condition of approval, a recommended condition. And that's really the criteria I have. I can scroll now to the conditions to see if there are any questions. But hopefully I summarized the questions for the commission pretty well.
Jenny, I have a question.
Yes.
Because this use is for auto repair, are there any specific guidance in the code that we have to look at as far as protection against spilling of fuels, getting into the getting under the ground and anything like that?
Sure. I think that's been a question in previous auto repair conditional use permits, but I
think I brought it up, yes.
Yeah, that vaguely sounds familiar. Jacob, I don't remember your answer to that. I mean, it seems like something regulated by DEQ and Public Works. Yeah. Yeah.
Our wastewater folks, they don't want the nasties in the stormwater, and they do have some standards pertaining to that. I'm not intimately familiar with them.
Basically, when you get a business license with the city, there's a pre-treatment form you fill out, and it states that you're not going to put any of those types of things into the system, and talks about any other improvements that you have to have on site to prevent that from happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
At least not by our department. It's taken care of. Yeah. So the conditions are set up like we normally see them. There's work required before the building permit, and then there's work required before C of O, before occupancy. This number 2 condition would only be needed if the commission tonight wants to require restriping and relocation of that ADA space. Otherwise, it's all just work that we expect to see happening before they're given certificate of occupancy by the building official or commencement of the use.
Do you have an estimate of the distance now of where the present ADA striping is?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Excuse me.
I'm grabbing my scale.
Do we have to require entire restriping, or could we just require that they move the ADA parking, the handicap parking, and and then work with it with the other lines?
Probably, since the ADA requires a wider spot than a normal spot, probably restripe the whole thing.
Okay.
So Jennifer, an ADA space looks like this. It's got an 8-foot loading zone and a 9-foot parking space. And so they may be able to do minimal restriping, but it's probably going to require you have to relocate the sign. And then what do you do with the old striping of the ADA space? You'd have to turn that back into,
Regular
you know,
parking.
you're basically going to have to repave and stripe the whole parking lot just because you've got that existing loading zone already in the other space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you,
Yes. So the distance is about 70 feet.
70 feet? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The full parking lot is just under 97 feet long. So.
And there is no other entrance that a handicapped person could use to get in closer than the 70 feet?
Yeah, I mean, that's the man door for employees. It would depend. They could probably go in through the overhead door if it were open and that was an expectation, but
Okay.
the man door is about that distance.
Okay, thanks you.
Do they need a driveway there? Is the sidewalk even with the street?
Yes, it's all the same grade in this location.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird circumstance, but yeah.
Yeah, well, there's one area where it goes straight up and another where the curb is about 12 inches up. I can't remember what streets.
Oh, and Holton.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are there any other questions about how the conditions are structured, or just about the conditions in general?
My one,
All landscaping is going to have to be done in planters, isn't it? That all rock?
I'm not familiar. I think Jacob had experience with the previous owner having issues with getting trees in particular, and that's probably why they did planters.
Yeah, I think it's all basalt there.
The way the condition is written is just to have that vertical and low landscaping. It doesn't necessarily say, planters are prohibited or anything like that. So,
No.
my question about the planters are, since they're in such poor condition now, we can require that they replace them. They don't meet the requirement now in the condition they're in.
Yeah, so the way the condition is written, so there's two sides that we're dealing with. One is alongside the building, and the way the recommended condition says is a new planter of equal or lesser width should replace it and be planted with a mix of low-lying and vertical plants. So that's the existing planter. The other side just says a mix of low-lying shrubs and vertical planting along that strip between the parking lot and the other building should be installed. So whether or not it's in a planter, it leaves it up to the applicant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Could we have the presentation by the applicant?
So I'm going to ask to unmute you, Joe.
Yeah, Joe Sharp here. I think Josh was going to present himself.
Okay.
He's on the cell phone number 3416. Know that if he's muted, can he hear you? I would think
Yes. So I've asked to unmute Josh, and he should have some option to start audio. Oops. Whoops, we might have both clicked at the same time there.
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you.
All right, you got me now. All right.
Great.
Yeah, this is Josh Harper. So I don't have a whole lot of a presentation or anything, just kind of listening here. Kind of sounds like what I read on the packet I've got. A lot of this stuff, I guess, I don't know if my plans on use would pertain to much of this. I had a few things on as far as the parking goes and the amount of vehicles being sold. Most of my vehicles being sold are going to be sold online. I don't expect to have, vehicles for display for sale. kind of restoration is my thing. And these vehicles are a little high end to be putting out on display somewhere. So that being said, I don't, incidentally, occasionally there might be one or two that don't make it to that level, and I would like to, be able to put them out for display. Kind of had a plan with that kind of tied into the ADA spot. Obviously, where the ADA spot is now, that would be the optimal spot to put something to display. It would get the most, the most views. People would see it from the street. So I would say, maybe at some point resealing, maybe not repaving, but resealing and restriping the parking lot, moving the ADA space, and then also, like we talked about with the smoker zone, gaining a space there, limiting the number of, basically not encroaching on the amount of spaces required for employee parking, customer parking, leaving a space or two available to sell, an incidental sale on a car or a truck or whatever. Basically, I don't know. I guess what I don't want is a limit on the amount of vehicles that could be sold, more as the display, how many are displayed and using up a space where there could be a parking space. That's not an issue to me. As I said, most of my sales will be, online, and like I said, they're higher end, and I don't really want them out anywhere anyway, where they can get touched or anything can happen to them. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. And I'd like maybe to defer to Joe, because I feel like he can probably, we've talked quite a bit, and I feel like he could probably explain it better than I could, if that makes any sense to anybody.
So my question is, how many cars do you estimate that you would store at any one time for sale?
Well, storing, typically when I'm going to sell a vehicle, it's probably a 5 to 6 month process of getting it ready to sell. It's pretty much a frame off restoration, every nut and bolt on the car. It's a brand new when I'm done with it. So that takes, 5 to 6 months. And right now, currently, just myself and my father, we can only do one of those cars at a time. So, and then obviously there's a lot of money that goes into it. You got to get it out there to sell it. So I would say 1 or 2, currently where we're at, unless we can grow, 1 or 2 at a time where we're at right now. If we can grow, get more people, obviously that number would go up. It's just it's a timing factor on it, I can only have so many done and ready to sell at one time, and it's usually one at a time. So
Well, the reason I asked that question is because auto sales are not allowed in that zone. And so we would have to put a limit on the number of vehicles that could be offered for sale or stored at any one time. Am I right, Jenny?
Yeah, I see Jacob rushing for the code. The staff report states that auto sales is a separate principal use, and so we just want to make sure that the auto sales are related to the restoration work. That's the main use. And Jacob, did you find out? I want to say retail of auto is allowed.
So vehicle repair, service, and sales is allowed. So, it can be within that spectrum. In this case, it's specific to service. But as Jenny mentioned, we have a parking standard, And anything outside, and really that's the question when we're talking about storage, are things on the outside. And I don't think the staff report was clear about that, and talking to Jenny
Okay.
about that just before.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
So it's about, let's say you have a use that requires 5 parking spaces. Those are supposed to be for the purpose of parking for your customers, employees, and such, not for storage of something else. So it's really a question of outdoor parking and storage or sales capacity.
And if I might add, there, it sounded like there was a solution here where it's one vehicle stored outside at a time for auto sales. That seems like an amenable solution to our parking problem and their issue with wanting to maybe sell 2 at a time, but have them stored inside, for example.
I have a question for Josh, if this is the appropriate time. I'm wondering, do you repair other people's vehicles, or you just work on your own restorations?
So what I do currently is just my own restorations, but I have a few customers that I've had that I've built their trucks from, basically from scratch. And they come back to me to have those trucks that I've built serviced by me. I built it. I'm the guy to bring it to if it needs something.
Do you have any idea?
That's what I do.
Do you have any idea how many vehicles you could put inside the building?
How many vehicles I could put inside the building and still be able to work, or just put them in there. So I could probably have 2 or 3 active vehicles being worked on, and there's probably enough space with tools and equipment. This is just a guess. I could probably put 3 more vehicles inside my tools, equipment, and then 3 that are actively being in the restoration process or being worked on.
I guess the reason I'm asking is because if cars started to stack up, you could avoid parking them outside by parking them in the building. That's where I'm getting at.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, I'm an old car nut, and I'm just curious of what kinds of cars you like to restore.
Toyota Land Cruisers.
Oh,
They're hot right now.
right.
Okay. Is that all the questions for everybody?
I think Joe, was there something else that we talked about possibly on the landscaping?
Yeah, I was kind of sitting out in the crowd. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk along with Josh or not, so I didn't want to interrupt. But I think as far as our discussions about the potential conditions, I think what Josh was referring to was that we more or less agree that the ADA spot should be near the door, at some point, just as general good practice. Our application specifically just kind of stayed away from building improvements and whatnot, because he's really going to be using the building as it is. I don't think that Josh and his family have much of an issue with repainting it, other than the fact that the lines that are there are pretty new, and there are a lot of lines all over the parking lot from old uses and old configurations. And so I think that what Josh was most concerned about when we talked earlier today was just in the fact that, am I going to have to do all of that before I physically start using it, because they want to get out of the building that they're in Portland right now, and get Josh closer to home, and sort of get rid of the other property and whatnot. So their move is more important than any sort of retail sales out there or any of that. They don't expect or receive currently, walk-in clientele or any of that. And so I think that between the parking, ADA kind of relocation there, and the application process, and just kind of submitting the parking plan and some of that, it was just extra stuff that kind of needs to get done right now. And then as far as landscaping and some of that goes, we're just headed into the holiday, just headed into December, and we wouldn't be able to plant much for landscaping until next spring at some point, and so I think that just kind of the logistics of getting the parking lot resurfaced and all of those kind of things, it's really just this building as their current location is really kind of his father, Larry, and Josh's personal garage, and they restored pretty cool autos. That's how we met. And they just kind of need to get moved ASAP, from their current location, and getting all of that done in December would be a little bit difficult. So we were just brainstorming. We didn't have a whole lot of language, to present with regard to that. But I think that if maybe Jenny and Jacob have an idea of how we may be able to defer the requirement to some point, as if and when they repaint, they'll relocate the ADA spot, and with the landscaping, kind of if that can be deferred until the spring when it's likely to work, that would be preferable. So I don't know what sort of conditions could be proposed in that regard. Not to get too far ahead of myself, but then on the retail sales, they, as most mechanics, could have any number of personal vehicles for sale at some given time, and I don't think they wanted to be too concerned about people thinking that they were, exceeding those. If somebody were to see 5 Land Cruisers, restored on a Land Cruiser site one time, I don't think they wanted to be concerned with how many physical autos that their business is selling, other than, the code right now basically says that they must maintain a certain number of auto spaces for their clientele and for their employees. They've got 1 extra as it stands right now, and it's far from being like a good spot to park a vehicle for display. So obviously, if Josh were to at some point display an auto for sale, it would need to be within eye distance of eye shot of the road, I would think. And so he would probably be painting and kind of reconfiguring that lot if and when he were to, step up his display of cars. And so I think that's really where his concern about the number of vehicles, if it was a numerical kind of restriction, getting into the definitions and kind of negotiating what that condition looked like, or that deed restriction looked like down the road, might be a little bit more difficult than just basically saying that he needs to conform to the ordinances, as they're written. If his auto sales are very incidental to the restoration work that they do, and he doesn't want to necessarily restrict him from being able to do anything down the road. He needs the conditional use for restoration and incidental auto sales, but there would only physically be 1 spot. So if there was a requirement that he parks any vehicles for sale or for display, I guess, exterior display, that they be in a designated parking spot of some sort, and so that kind of limits him to putting it only in the parking area that's been approved, and it would more or less require that he reconfigures the parking lot. And so if there was another condition that basically said if and when he does any parking improvements out there whatsoever, that he moves the ADA spot. Something relatively simple, but the planners would have more input, I guess, on how that might, whether it's possible in the first place. And that's kind of what Josh's idea was. Can we propose something just simple? If we reconfigure anything, we'll swap it all around. If we current standards, you know.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I can speak to the timing question. So by default, let's say, and usually in the report, we'll talk about timing. And it's common for us to say prior to occupancy, because it's clean, it gets done, it's not something you have to track. But the code does say conditions of approval shall be fulfilled within the time limit set forth in the decision. So if they say 100 years, well, you got 100 years to do it. If they say a week, man, that's not much time, but it's a week. But if there's no time limit set forth within 1 year, so 1 year is kind of the silent default.
That makes sense. I think his bigger concern was that it had to all be done prior to basically getting a business license, you know. So.
Are you associated with Land Cruisers Northwest, St. Helens Road?
No,
me.
that's actually that's a friend of mine. Actually, I went to middle school with one of the co-owners of Land Cruiser Northwest.
Okay, well, I happened to lease them their space for 10 years. And so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when they were at the, down in Northwest Portland.
Yeah, the site before they're at now.
Grand Central Baking down there, yeah. And I think one thing, when we get to deliberations, I think one thing we need to look at is spare parts. We've been talking about parking cars and things, but you guys have tons of parts to build these rigs, and you got to store them somewhere. So could you address that a little bit?
Actually, I have a couple storage. I have a storage unit, and I also have another building that I have my parts stored in. Currently, I don't. That's another part of the reason to try to move to St. Helens. My other building is in St. Helens, where I store my parts.
Okay.
And I find myself midday traveling from Portland to St. Helens to get a part. So I have my parts. My parts are stored, with the exception of a few, you know, the everyday parts that you need all the time. I would say probably 99% of my parts are stored in another building. So that's, I guess that's kind of not an issue.
Yeah, I just speaking from experience on what they had in their yard and was for display was lots of leftover parts or parts to be and wrecks and that sort of thing. So
yeah, and as a matter of fact, those guys, I talk to those guys a lot. We do business together, and their current landlord is kind of getting on them about the stuff that's stored outside there.
Yeah.
So that's
appreciate it.
That's always a concern. Yep.
Okay.
I would just like to add one clarification in case the applicant wants to chime in on this, because I heard mixed information about when restriping would be desired for the parking lot and potential relocation. So, the commission needs to decide whether or not we are going to require, as part of this decision, moving the ADA space. It sounds like the applicant is amenable to that, but may not be immediately. And so if they're wanting to do changes to the parking at a later date beyond this, a conditional use permit modification to change the layout of the parking lot would be needed at that time. And I wanted to clarify that for the applicant, and if they wanted to chime in about timing on when they'd like to move the ADA space.
So my thing about moving it mostly is the amount of, I don't know who has actually seen the lot and who hasn't, but there's stripes from obviously previous uses. There's stripes from the last use. There's a lot of lines on that parking lot. And the latest lines that were painted, which I assume are the latest lines, are the current layout, and they're pretty good lines. It wouldn't be something that, sometimes you can go on a worn out parking lot and repaint lines and you're fine. This one, I believe, would have to be resealed at a minimum and then basically start from scratch. That's not really something that, it would be awfully hard to do in the wintertime in Oregon. Matter of fact, I called a couple places that do that kind of work, resealing and striping, and they said, you know, we're not taking any jobs like that until spring, possibly summer, depending on the weather goes, because they won't guarantee it. If they're putting it down on a wet surface that they can't get completely dry, they're not going to guarantee their work. So it's easier to just not do the work and do it at a later date. So that's my big issue with it. And I think, like Joe and I had discussed, that we could kind of wrap those things all into one, with the moving the ADA spot, restriping the smoker zone to gain a parking spot so that we could use for a potentially display vehicle out near the street altogether. So basically my time frame would be, at the soonest, would be probably late spring, when those striping companies and sealing companies kind of get back to work on an older parking lot like that. They're basically going to want it, best conditions possible to do that kind of work if they're going to guarantee it. So late spring, early summer would be my estimate on a time frame on that.
Okay, any other questions? All right, do we have anybody else neutral testimony?
Okay, so for the folks out there, there's testimony in favor, neutral, and opposed. And so there's a lot of chat on here. So raise your hand or put something in the chat if you choose to speak. And if we don't see anybody, we'll assume there's no neutral comments.
I don't know if Josh can see all of the comments, but we could probably just address a few of them if you'd like to get them out of the way. I know that he would probably like to express that he's from the area, and some of the chat questions there.
Yeah, it's really weird. The problem with Zoom, so normally a public hearing, everybody shuts up except those speaking. And so it's weird having the chat in a public hearing setting.
I would also add, it doesn't get recorded and there's no names for the record for the chat. So if there is testimony in opposition, neutral, or in support, it must be either written in the form of an email or a letter given to the planning department, or spoken now. The chat does not qualify as written testimony.
Cool.
or recorded for that matter.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand or send a chat that they would like to be unmuted to speak.
Okay. Is that including opposition, or can you see that?
Well, the only thing that was announced was neutral, so we'll want to make those calls just to be thorough.
So, Russ, that's for you to say. Is there any testimony?
The dog was eating too loud. Yeah. All right. Does the commission have any other final questions?
Oh, testimony in opposition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any testimony in opposition?
Let's just give it a second here.
Okay.
And give people a chance to raise their hand or comment.
Okay, seeing none.
I do not see any, no.
Okay, not seeing any. Does the commission have any final questions? Hearing none, hearing no further questions from the commission, no further responses from the staff, the public record is closed, and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decisions. All right. Any things that hasn't been brought up that should be talked about?
Greg, you are muted. Actually, all the planning commissioners are muted. It's deliberations. Unmute yourselves. You have to talk to each other.
He's trying.
Okay.
There we go. Now it let us.
Okay, Greg is unmuted now.
Would it help if I brought up the conditions so you guys can discuss?
My question would be on the trash enclosure, why is it right against the sidewalk instead of that normal? Did we talk about that before?
I mean, my guess would be ease of access for Hudson. That was just my
around the corner anyway from the side, but I'm just wondering why. And then my own other thing is, will they be painting on site? Is that included in a vehicle restoration? Probably irrelevant, but I had a bill one time next to somebody that was painting cars and it intruded on us quite heavily. So.
Like as far as odor or?
Overspray, odor,
No, yeah, it was the
hazmat,
yeah.
lots of stuff when you paint cars.
The other
Building
thing-
code stuff too.
Right,
Okay.
there's lots of stuff for painting
The other
cars.
thing I'm struggling with is I rarely see a car more repair than restoration, that the parking lot's just not jam-packed with cars waiting. You see it as you enter our county right now. So to have no cars stored outside or very few. I don't have any problem with the number of cars being sold, but I would like to see it limited per time. You know, if by the end of the year they've sold 50 cars, I don't, as long as they're displaying a minimum outside.
It sounds like there's only 2 people restoring. They're not going to have 50 cars for a long time.
Yeah.
Except,
I don't care. The number doesn't matter to me. I just, if it became 5 or 6 cars sitting out there at a time, obviously it clearly becomes
they
a car lot.
already said they don't want to put them outside. They're too valuable to leave outside. They're not planning to do that.
To Russ's point, and I think Councilor Cohen also mentioned about it, is about the street standard for debris for spare parts. Although with the economy the way it is, you leave any metal out, it'll grow legs and walk away. But it's just leaving debris out. I just know how you can, you know, being married to somebody that restored cars for 20 years, I kind of know how one part turns into 20. And all of a sudden it's like, what happened to the yard? And so I just want to make sure we have clear expectations about what the visual street standard is.
Yeah, and I would point out condition 6 does not allow outdoor storage even related to this use. So I just pulled it up here.
Okay,
Number
thank you,
6.
Jenny.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So to address Jennifer's comment about the storage of vehicles outside, this was the kind of the condition I thought that we should add something in there. And I just have a proposal, maybe the commission can agree for that since we've talked about it. So this use shall be limited to 1 vehicle for sale displayed outside at a time, could just be added to number 5.
Would that be displayed, would it be parked in one of the parking spots? Or would it be displayed somewhere else?
It would be parked in a parking spot given that they have an overage of 1 off-site parking space in their lot if we require 3A here. So that they can create 2 additional spaces in that loading zone, which puts them over by 1 space per our code. And so we can kind of justify the 1 stored outside by that additional space that we're adding.
And I would recommend that in the conditions, we specify that no more than one designated parking space be allowed to be utilized for storing a vehicle to be sold or to be repaired or whatever. So that it's understood that no more than one vehicle spot is allowed to be used for their business rather than for customers or employee parking.
Got it. Yeah, I think that was the intent of what I read. The one thing I would ask a distinction on, are you saying that even vehicles waiting to be restored?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not the purpose of those 8 parking spots.
Yeah, so maybe clarifying one vehicle for sale or for restoration to be displayed outside at any given time is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've got to have that wording.
Because if you don't, then you can use you can use as many parking spots as you like for either sales or for storage until they can be brought in to be worked on. So I think that has to be specified in the actual conditions. I don't have a problem with giving them 4 to 6 months to get the landscaping and the restriping done. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with the number of parking spots designated for storage or sales.
Yeah, I think they need more than 4 months, though. I have a friend that reseals and restripes. He shut his business down for the winter, so I don't think it is realistic to ask them to reseal the parking lot until spring or summer, but within that first year is what I would be on board with.
Right.
Also, just, I know there's a code for a number of parking spaces, but it sounds like their business model has very few customer drop-ins. So I think for the most of the time, it's going to be an empty parking lot till maybe they have a car to sell and there'll be 1 car out there. And then maybe their employee's car, 2 cars. And that's it. There's only 2 people.
You're not going to find them leaving a car out there overnight.
No.
No.
This is a specialty operation.
It's totally specialty.
And really, this is one where a restored Land Cruiser is pretty cool. You want to see that outside. But as we always talk about, this conditional use permit could have a life that lives for 10, 20, 30 years potentially.
Yeah.
And, these folks may be great for a long time, but then someone else with a similar operation comes in, no additional permits needed, and you could have a totally different situation.
I had a question for Jacob. I know that there was some talk a couple of months ago about the state changing code about parking required in residential. Are there changes coming for business parking requirements?
No, the residential parking is based on the state's concern about affordable housing, about housing units and stuff like that. And so that's why it's very residential centric.
Okay, double checking.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
If we have a car repair in this location, I think this is the ideal candidate because it's high-end cars. They're not gonna.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be 20 cars at a time. That's not what I'm envisioning here, but I could see it where you'd have the 1 car for sale outside and 2 father and son aren't going to drive together. So that's 3 cars outside and, other people stopping by. I think you could fill those spaces up.
I agree. And I would like to go back to something Commissioner Pugsley mentioned. I have no problem with extending the time frame for getting the outdoor work done, but let's not do it. If we did it a year, that puts it into another winter. How about if we settled on 9 months?
Yeah, I could agree with that.
That would get through
Yeah.
Okay with that.
And is that for the landscaping as well? Are you guys in
Yes.
support of
Yes.
these conditions?
Yes, landscaping, repaving, restriping.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenny, is there a prohibition against having parking in the back of the building?
Currently, it's the drive aisle, so that's it's an access way. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes right through.
I was wondering if there was enough to park behind the
Trash?
garbage.
Yeah, the trash area, yeah.
So the trash enclosures here.
I mean,
A motorcycle.
There's
Employee-
also a man door on this side here too.
but seems like there's enough room for employee parking back there and not have anybody in the front.
We're not coming up with a proposal. That's their job.
Okay.
The one thing that I want to also add, that on any condition, I would recommend that the ADA be moved to where it's being proposed by the city.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that we want to require restriping. We'll delay it up to 9 months. So we will have condition 2 included. They'll provide a plan that shows where they want to move it. We'll require 2 additional spaces in that loading zone. This applies, you're in support of the landscaping, and that we've added the condition about 1 vehicle stored outside for either sales or restoration at a time.
Yes.
To number
And
5.
you've got the 6 feet for the garbage.
Yeah, and that's included already.
That's
Yeah.
not included. I just checked that.
Yep. And exterior lighting and wheel stops.
Yes,
Does that address all the issues, Jenny?
Yes.
yes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application with the conditions as stated.
I'll second it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor, I was off.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, it's unanimous, it
Good
passes.
luck.
Okay, the city planner will bring back findings, approval, signature at the next regular meeting. Does any commissioner want to make a motion to have a chairperson sign the final decision?
So moved.
Moved. Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes.
And since there's a lot of folks out here, what that last part was is the ordinary procedure would be for the staff to bring the conditions to the next planning commission meeting, which is 30 days away, a month away, to review it. But usually what we'll do is ask the chairperson to come and review that, so an applicant doesn't have to wait that long to get their decision. And so we just want you to be aware of what's going on.
Okay. It's now,
Hey, Russ, you,
yes,
you skipped the approval of the minutes from last time, and we want to do that after the
Yeah.
hearing now?
did I skip that?
Yes?
Yes.
I remember.
We approved them.
We did it.
Approve the minutes.
We did
went-
it.
We approved
You
them.
did?
We
Yes.
did it already.
You were asleep.
I
No,
guess-
he's walking on his, he's out milking the cows on his farm there.
We did that
I wish I
first.
was in Vermont right now.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's 8:08.
There you go.
Okay, public hearing is open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a historic resource review. Subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 12600 on map 4N1W-3VB. The applicant is Lower Columbia Engineering LLC. The owner is the Old School LLC. Because the quasi-judicial proceedings require observance, certain procedural formalities will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters, required statements. Is any member of the commission wish to declare ex parte conflict of interest or bias in this matter?
I just want to mention that I'm on the board of directors for the Columbia County Museum Association. And there is some proposals that the museum might move over there. So we're looking at the site, but it doesn't affect my decision in one way or another.
Would they be moving in part or in total? I mean, along with this proposal?
No, it's not part of the proposal. I just want to make it clear that I've talked to the county about the move, so
Okay, all right,
probably overly cautious, but I just want to mention it.
sure. Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of any commissioner to make a fair decision? Jacob, do we hear anybody?
Jacob, you're on mute.
Whoops, sorry. Does not look like anybody has any comments about your ability to make a fair decision.
Okay, generally the order proceedings will be as follows. Required statements of the staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by the applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations and decision. Following statements are required to be made in the commencements of the hearing pursuant to the City Code OR and ORS 197.7635. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.36.0403, criteria for alteration. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as comprehensive plan or land use regulation, such as that is found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Jenny, is that you again?
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you all see these photos?
Yep.
Great. Awesome. So I don't think we've ever done a full historic resource review for this building. So it was kind of fun to just do a little bit of research for my job. So we've got a proposal to install a new ADA access and remove an existing wheelchair ramp located on the side of this building. The applicant is Lower Columbia Engineering, but they are representing Columbia County. Columbia County is looking at utilizing the first floor of this building for some of their administrative offices. And the current ADA elevator or wheelchair ramp on the side of the building is just not a feasible way to get those with disabilities into the building because you need staff to operate it. So here we are. This is a listed resource in our local landmarks list. And so we're required to do a public hearing and, scrutinize this a little bit more than we would if it was just a historic resource review where we are looking at architectural guidelines. So we've got code to follow here. I am going to walk through this photos attachment. And then we'll go through the applicant's plans after that. So this is one of the more older photos that we have of the building, but I've also supplemented it with the artist's or the architecture's rendering of the building. This was actually prior to its construction, so I feel like it's kind of a good indication of what the building looked like when it was constructed. I also, want to point out a couple of things. So this was the John Gum School. I'm sure you're all familiar. It was named after a major benefactor of this building. And I thought it was interesting that the original old school burned and John Gum stepped in and provided the funding for this new building. The original listing in our historic district's nomination form mentions that there's a central bay with a pedimented pavilion, which I had to look up and learn that that's this kind of recessed entry with this kind of gable roof on the top here with 4 Tuscan columns. And that's important because we're proposing some modification to that area. And so I would argue that that's one of the more significant architectural components of this building is that recessed entry and Tuscan columns. I looked at the CCMA, the Museum Association's website, and found just a brief history of the building. The school's final yearbook said that the school served grades 1 through 12 from 1919 through 1926, grades 1 through 8 until 1958, and K through 6 until December 1999. And in December, the building was declared unsafe and closed immediately. And since then, according to building permit records, the first floor and basement have occupancy for office use, storage, and some commercial, limited commercial activities. The second floor is unfinished and doesn't have a use currently established. So as I mentioned, the county is hoping to relocate some of their offices on the first floor. I also, just for fun, had a really good time looking through some class photos. I also think it's interesting because you can see that the columns have remained untouched through the years. Yeah, these photos were fun. So here's what the county is showing as the current accessible route. So this is, the top left is standing at the intersection of kind of the parking lot area and St. Helens Street. This is a newly installed ADA ramp at the intersection here. And then on the top right, you just kind of follow this sidewalk down, and this is the path that someone who parks in the ADA space on St. Helens Street would take to get into the front of the building. So you kind of follow this sidewalk up, make a right, turn the corner, and then there was like a box in the way here, but basically this is the route that someone would take in a wheelchair to get to the building. And then the last few photos here are the location of the alteration. So this is where they're actually proposing the ramp. Currently it's a planter. They're actually proposing to remove this existing curb. So this curb line would get all removed, and you'll see that on the plans that I'm going to pull up. But I think it helps. The plans are 2D. It kind of helps give some context to see the photos of the building itself. And while we're looking at these, note that the paint color does change at the window level. And so I think maintaining that line is important, and just keep that in mind. And then as we go down, so the ramp itself will start around this location and kind of turn and then come back around and then curve back to get the grade that they need. And the biggest alteration here, you know, in addition to removing that planter, is they actually want to saw out a portion of this basalt base. And at first, I mean, that might seem like a lot, but from the front facade, you actually won't see any of that alteration because it continues here. So we'll look at the plans in more detail, but this is the area that they're proposing to saw out. And we can come back to this photo too after we've looked at the plans a little bit more. This is the site of the existing ADA or the wheelchair elevator on the side. I want to note that these are the yellow railings I'm going to talk about later. And then these are the photos of some existing railings that they're trying to match the new railings to. And so I just provided a photo of their shape and their color. So let's go to the plans. Okay, can you all see that? It moved. Yeah. Great. Okay, so as I stated in the photos, this is that curb of the planter that they want to remove. And then here's the route of the sidewalk. So someone in a wheelchair will come up this way, turn the corner, and do kind of this switch back to get up to the main pedimented pavilion. So this X is the part of the base of the columns that they're proposing to remove. And as you can see, you can't see it from the front because when you're looking, you just see the columns themselves. So the applicant is proposing to match the paint color of the ramp to the existing paint color of the side of the building. And then they're also proposing this hand railing it's 36 inch pipe handrail and matching the style of the front entry handrail. And then they also, so you'll see this kind of concrete cap proposed on this second part of the ramp. So they're styling this after the concrete cap that's located on the side of the building next to that wheelchair elevator that we saw. And so I think they're making an effort to utilize existing features of the building to kind of match this new feature. Let me see if I have any other notes on this plan here. I think that's the basics. Are there any questions about what they're proposing at this point? And then we can get a little bit into the criteria.
This is the simplest possible way that they can address the ADA requirement.
You mean as far as looking at other alternatives?
Well, yes, it just seems to be such a, I mean, I look at what they did to the new courthouse, and it just seems that it's such a long, convoluted pathway for wheelchairs to get up.
Yeah, I think that's a great question for the applicant, because I think they did look at alternatives and maybe this was the simplest. That's a great question to ask them, I think, Greg.
Well, it'd be the simplest, keeping with the historic facade. Jennifer, what do you think there?
I love the idea. I think at first glance, you're not going to notice it if it's painted the same color as the brake line. My question would be, and it probably stated in here, but I don't remember. The handrail, is it also going to be painted the same color so it disappears from the street?
So the color they're proposing is the same color as the existing handrail. So let me pull up.
We don't want yellow.
Yeah, so you'll see one of the conditions of approval, and we'll get into the staff report just quickly, but is to repaint this. It was probably yellow because of the wheelchair elevator, but this is the existing handrail that's on the front entry, these two photos on the right, and they're proposing to match the paint color to that, which is basically the same color, Jennifer, as the wall behind it. Yeah.
It's nice that they're getting rid of that big ugly monster on the side.
Yes. Yeah, and I looked to see if it would damage any of the concrete, and it's really not. It's just in the stairs. It's not attached to the walls at all of the building.
Jennifer, go back to that plan, the floor plan.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. I know the one issue I have when I've tried to build anything, I need 36 inches clear, and they've got 2'11", so they don't even meet code when they come up to the top of the ramp.
This is something we've addressed with our building official. So what he's stated is that there's some leeway for historic structures, and has stated that this would not cause him heartburn. I'm not sure the code route that he's utilizing because I'm not the building official, but he's looked at this and not initially raised an eye, looked into it, and then felt comfortable.
That's a UBC code. I don't see how you can do that, but anyway, that's a lot of effort.
What is the width there?
It's
2'11".
Yep.
I had a question about the doors. Are the doors included in this project? Because most old buildings have a giant threshold. And how, after you put that giant ramp on there and somebody has a power chair, how are they ever going to get that door open and get in?
Also a great question, Jenny. So the applicant originally was going to replace these doors, but it was not addressed with historic integrity at all. And so for ease of approving the ramp itself, they have just removed that part of the scope out, because alterations to doors, as we know, can raise alarm for historic preservation purposes. But it sounds like you're talking about the actual hardware underneath the door, not the door itself.
If I get up there and I'm in a power chair and I do not have a personal support worker, how will I get in that building?
Yeah.
And how will I get over that threshold? And are the doors suitable for somebody to pass through there? Or are we approving a ramp that nobody can get in?
Yeah, that's, again, a good question for the applicant. We didn't look into the accessibility of the existing doors. We just noted that any change to those doors is going to trigger a hearing just like this.
I have a question. I don't know if it's within your scope or whether it's an issue to bring up to the applicant. But what about, you said that they want to saw off a portion behind the one pillar. Does that potentially impact the integrity of that pillar?
It'll be for the engineer to ask him.
Okay.
Okay.
So really quickly, let me just, because we are basing our decision off of criteria in the staff report. I just want to quickly note the conditions and then we're good. We can move on to applicant. Okay. So in honoring our conditions, we want to just make sure that the physical treatment or construction technique that's used to remove a portion of the column's base does not damage the existing historic base, and that any newly exposed surfaces are finished to match existing adjoining surfaces. This is stated on the plans, but I think it's really important, since we're exposing new surfaces, that it match as best as possible. And that all new plaster finishes on the ramp match the existing wall. And then if the commission agrees, the new pipe handrail and the yellow painted handrail near the former ADA wheelchair elevator are painted to match the existing handrails in the front and side facades. So those are the simple conditions. Just want to get those in. Are there questions about that, or we can move on to applicant?
Is there signage that delineates the ADA access as part of this permit?
They didn't propose any. That would be a good question if it's required.
Any other questions?
The handrails on the ramps, on the proposed ramp, wouldn't that look better if it was in the beige, not in the?
I agree with you that it matches the color so that it.
Yeah, the color of the lower portion of the building underneath the window.
That's what I said earlier.
And the other ones that are not involved could be painted that same color.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand you guys correctly. So this existing handrail
is white
and should match this kind of palish pink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also the one on the new ramp.
Yes.
Should match the lower portion of that building.
That's what I said when I saw the yellow rail, that they all needed to be pink.
Okay.
Pink.
We're getting into deliberation, so let's move the hearing
Move
forward.
on to the presentation for the applicant. Jacob?
Let's see. So
I just asked Brett Carr to unmute himself with Lower Columbia Engineering.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I don't actually have anything additional to present, but I can answer your questions.
Well, I've got one question about the clearance, less than 36 inches.
Yeah, there's an exception in the ADA code where you can have a narrowing of access down to 32 inches, but for a shorter distance than what we're proposing. And so that is part of what we worked out worked with Mike on the exception for historic or existing structures, that we can get away with being an inch shy as opposed to having to do something far more severe to the existing pediment base.
Is that base a structural base all the way through? Do you know?
The lower portion, it's basically there for mass to restrain the columns, And so the removing of that section will, have to do the full analysis still, but it should be fine.
Okay.
I have a question
Yes.
regarding alternative looked at. The front facade is the major feature in this building. Was there any consideration made to having the ramp go up like the west facade, or it's not quite as tall as the east facade where they have the handicap ramp now? Did that get looked at and some alterations to that rather than the front of the building?
Yeah, we explored those. The front is actually the lowest point above the adjoining grade, and the west side north is actually down on these drawings. The west side, where the existing wheelchair lift is, we looked at a couple options there, but those involved ramps that were on the order of 54 to 60 feet long, so they were even more intrusive to the site, and stuck way off the side of the building, because you ended up having at least 3 switchbacks for those also. And so it was our feeling that it was easier to hide the mass of the ramp against the front of the building than to have it sticking off of the side in some fashion.
And is that material you're going to cut out, is that actually basalt, quarry basalt?
No, it is just clay tile with plaster finish over it. That's what the building, for the most part, is constructed out of.
Did you do any value engineering on the putting in a new mechanical lift off to where the existing one was?
The problem with any of the limited use ramps like that is that it would require someone who comes to the site to get staff to, operate the lift for them, to give them access to the building. And where the lift is located, or would be located, even if it were replaced, the feeling was that it would force people with limited mobility, or who are in a wheelchair, to sort of take the back entrance, and we felt it was more appropriate to give them access to the same entry that everyone else uses, especially because the county offices and stuff that are being proposed to go in there are going to be configured to be centralized around the main entry for serving, the public.
Does the front doors of the building where you plan to put the ramp, are they required to be automated?
They do not need to be automated. We may have to add a low power operator or something. The doors need to be rebuilt, even if we aren't, when I say rebuilt, I mean like the internal hardware, because currently they're difficult to operate under the best of circumstances. And so that will be one of the things that we can explore, is switching out the threshold, which from being there, I don't feel like the threshold is actually a problem. But that was an excellent question, and it's something that we can do without altering the appearance of the doors. And so kind of the same thing if we have to go with like a low power door operator or something.
Okay.
Going back to the modifications to that base, as an engineer, what would you say the worst case scenario would be if you once have taken that base out, could that impede the structure or the ability of that column?
No, because the columns are really not doing any significant structural work for the building. They're mostly just there for their decorative sake.
Okay.
Okay, now we move on to testimony for support of this application.
Okay, so anybody either raise your virtual Zoom hand or put a message in the chat saying that you would like to speak if so desired. In favor
Or neutral.
or neutral. And I don't see any takers.
Okay, well, is there anybody out there that would be in opposition of this?
It's the same question to anybody who is opposed. And I do not see anybody wants to speak.
All right. Commission have any final well, there's no rebuttal. And so the commission have any final questions? Anybody? All right, hearing none, hearing no further questions, the commission and no further responses from the staff, the public record is closed.
Hold on, can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Since I don't get to be the debater, manipulator, whatever you call you guys. I'm really concerned because I've seen somebody tip a wheelchair out of something that was presumably accessible. I'm a little concerned that we're approving a ramp with no double check on those doors. So I'm kind of concerned that we're parting it out, and it's like that all of a sudden there's a ramp there and it's presumed it's accessible. And what is the mechanism to make sure that door meets the standard of an unassisted entry by a wheelchair? I'm just always nervous about when we open the gate and it's assumed, and I just would hate to see anybody have an accident or somebody get up there and not be able to get in the building or go off those steps or something, because somebody tipping a power wheelchair is a very ugly, traumatic accident.
Jacob, the Planning Commission acting as the Historic Landmarks Commission's approving a historic resource review for the proposed ramp. The building official has the full authority to ensure that the route is fully accessible. So it's really just outside this body's realm, but I will take it upon personally to ask Mike, like, hey, if you get a building permit for this, do you look at the hardware of the door? Because I don't know that question, but I assume the answer is yes.
We've just never done this before, and I always get hit in the community with, how'd you let this happen without thinking of this?
Right.
So I just thought we have to ask the question when we're modifying a historic building.
Well,
Yeah.
wouldn't that come back to the Planning Commission anyway? Because it would be a modification of a major portion of the historic structure?
If it's interior, like if he's adding a motor to the door itself, that wouldn't trigger the need for historic resource review.
From what the engineer was saying, I thought he indicated the doors would have to be replaced.
So it's a building code question. When something is triggered for building permits, the building official has to consider a variety of things, including the value of the project, and there's some proportional amount of ADA improvements that are supposed to occur, starting with the outside and accessibility into it. If this group is going to get beat up, it's for approving something that looks like a sore thumb, not for accessibility. This could be a ramp. It could also be a water slide, which we know is not accessible. This is about the historic integrity, not about the accessibility. The accessibility is important, but it is a separate matter from this body.
Okay.
All right, did we close the record, public record?
Not yet. That was just extra questions for
Okay,
staff.
questions, all right. All right, so we're still deliberating.
No,
I had a question for Jenny before.
Okay, questions, keep them up. Yep, go ahead.
Are you there, Dan?
Come in, Dan.
Uh-oh,
Frozen.
he frozen Dan.
Frozen.
Dan is frozen.
Frozen.
It's a
Snow's
good
coming early.
question. It's a really good
Wake up,
question.
I don't think I've
Without
ever seen
blaming.
Dan frozen before.
Are we still in questions before deliberation, though, just to clarify?
Yeah. Yeah, the hearing hasn't technically been closed, Russ. I think he just asked if there were any other questions before closing it, and hence Jenny's questions.
Dan's never at a loss for words.
Yeah,
This is amazing. So are we deliberating?
still got questions. That,
I think Dan's re-logging in.
well, and that can come up during the deliberations too.
Yeah. Yep. So could you close the hearing, Russ?
Okay, the public record is closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decisions. All right. Come in, Dan.
Conditions, can we change the railing to be painted to match the color, the lower color of the building itself?
Yeah.
The yellow one and the white one and the blue one and the
Yeah.
anything that's a railing matches the lower.
Jenny, bring
Yeah.
up the facade of the building, would you?
Sure. Yeah. The way I wrote it, based on my notes, just all existing and future hand railing shall be painted to
Thank you.
match the bottom.
Yes.
Yep. I got
Yep.
it. And I can still bring up the facade if you want it.
Close to what I wrote.
Jenny?
Yes.
Is there a possibility that we could also add as part of the conditions that the elevator and all the exterior material on the one side has to be removed once the new ramp is placed in the front?
Sure, we can condition to just make sure that any remnant of the wheelchair is removed. It was part of their proposal, so I don't think they'll have an issue with that. I can add that.
Yeah, do add that.
I would, knowing how
Yeah.
we're dealing with the county, I think it needs to be in writing.
I agree with you, Greg.
So I want that one side, I don't know if it's the southern, the east side or the west side, return to what it previously was before the addition of the elevator. The railing repainted, the color, the pink, and all the extra apparatus taken out.
I'm sorry, are we in deliberations? My computer just shut down unexpectedly.
Yeah, we're in deliberations.
Do you remember your question, Dan?
Yeah. Timing. I just wanted to ask Jenny if she had been to the Capitol building in Salem since they put the ADA ramps in the front.
That ramp is amazing.
I haven't.
Oh, I thought he was asking me.
I was asking Jenny.
Oh.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Dan and I, before COVID, would see each other at the Capitol quite frequently on our adventures. But that ADA access is so much better and so much more inclusive and easier to find. It's awesome.
What I wanted to say about it is it's on the front of the Capitol of the state.
It is.
Coming from the side, and very similar kind of arrangement.
Yeah, it's from the garden area there. It's super cool. I wasn't going to go down that little path, but it's like that whole misfits to the rear kind of thing. I think as people improve buildings, they're kind of like access for all means as close to the front as possible.
You know, Senator Johnson broke her hip or whatever. She had to go in through a wheelchair off the side. It was not very nice.
The other one was bad. It was, you really had to like have a trail of Skittles to find it. So this is
Right.
way better.
So I agree that it looks the nicest to be in the front.
Yeah.
And it can be hidden nicely, and it places the person that is has in a wheelchair in the same equal status as someone coming in the front door. It shouldn't be shoved around the back.
Well, you think about where buses unload and stuff, and you want to just have everybody, you know, to be able to access the building, a public building, which is what the county's doing here, should be public.
I agree.
Perfect. Thanks for bringing that up, Dan.
Yeah.
So, Greg, you just listed some conditions that you wanted to see.
Yeah.
Does everyone agree? Did maybe repeat them, Greg?
Yeah, thank you.
Well, the one that I proposed was, what side is that, Jenny? Is that the east or the west?
West.
Okay. On the west side, my proposal was to add as a condition that the county be required to remove all the apparatus for the wheelchair lift and return that entrance to its former self, to paint the railing that same color as the base of the building. We could make that condition number 4.
Okay. Any other changes?
Yeah, I think they should put the ramp on the east side. The same elevation.
Yes. Russ? Enough.
Okay. Just talking
If there's
architecture.
nothing else, I'll make a motion that we go ahead with the way it's been amended and with the additional number 4 added to this conclusion.
I'll second it.
And but all the railing is
Yep.
going to be painted to match the.
Yeah.
Yeah, so condition 3 is amended for all new and existing railing to match the bottom portion of the building.
Yes.
Right.
Which was probably added in the 60s or 70s. It's clearly not in this photograph in 1956, but I'm happy to see it's not a bunch of stuff to look at, but it just kind of hopefully can go away when you're looking at it from the street.
Okay, it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Okay. Is this the one I bring? Okay.
I finally get a break.
This is a decision. Was there a motion for signature? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't get that.
I move.
No, okay, I'll second.
I beat you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Okay. Moving right along. It's 8:47. Public hearing is now open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of the hearing is a request for a variance. Subject property is identified the county assessor's map as lot 200 and 301 on map 4N1W-8AA. The applicant is Eon Flood. The owner is Northwest Oregon Housing Authority. Since this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, requires observance of certain procedural formalities. We'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare ex parte conflict of interest or bias in this matter? Hearing none. Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of the commissioner to make a fair decision? Anybody, Jacob?
I'm looking, and I don't see any virtual frowny faces in that regard.
Okay. Generally, the proceedings will be as follows. Required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by the applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations and decision. The following statements are required to be made in the commitments of the hearing pursuant to the City Code and ORS 197.7635. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.108.050, 1A to E. Criteria for granting a variance. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as a comprehensive plan, land use regulation, such as that is found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. And that's Jacob.
Thank you, Chairperson Hubbard. So this will be a bit of deja vu for most of you. A little over a year ago, if you recall, we had a conditional use permit. This is the property across Gable Road from Walmart. It was for a 238 unit apartment complex. Since then, the folks have been working towards their final development plans and all the bureaucracy they get to deal with, because these are HUD funded projects, and the bureaucracy is pretty amazing, just from the little bit I have had to see. But in looking at the project, there's a couple things that came up for them that warranted, in their view, a couple of variances to building height and to bicycle parking. So we're a little more focused than before when we're considering everything with the conditional use permit. I'm gonna share my screen here so we can look at the plans. Since a picture speaks 1,000 words. Okay, so to give you a little more locational context, especially for those people in the audience that may have not been watching the public hearing a little over a year ago. So here's Gable Road, here's US 30. This is a very well-known intersection. This would be Walmart here. You have the complex here with Starbucks, Mod Pizza, etc. This is Safeway there, and then kind of off here is US Bank. This is the oil place right there, and of course the subject property with all the detail in there. We have several buildings. Back then this was called the senior housing. These were the townhouses, and these were called the multifamily housing. The bicycle parking regards the senior housing structure, and the building height regards some of these multifamily structures. This is the bottom floor of the senior building, and this regards the bicycle parking. Our code requires 1 bicycle space per dwelling unit, and so that means if we have 238 dwelling units as proposed, we're supposed to have 238 bicycle parking spaces. The applicant proposes a reduction of that by about 50%. And so based on that, all the bicycle parking for this one building would be in the bottom floor, as highlighted there. Back to the site plan. Notice the red markings. That's referring to some of these buildings for building height. And the normal maximum building height is 35 feet. And if you recall, you know, we kind of talked about building height quite a bit. And some of these buildings were a little bit taller than 35 feet before. And, you know, they really looked for some good arguments about attic space and stuff like that, not counting. But being a city along the river, we're used to people getting pretty excited about building height. And as you all agreed, we have to kind of consider our rules very explicitly. So the applicant is back with a variance for, and the variance talks about up to 38 feet, but this shows it being a little less, at least at the midpoint. So those are the building height proposals. Here's an overall of the plan, and that one's probably less relevant. So the variance, if approved, would allow these reductions. In reviewing them, I don't have a lot of heartburn. There's a lot of arguments about affordable housing and reducing costs, and because it's funded by the LIFT funds, we know that from that program, from the community housing or community action team housing project on 18th Street from a couple years ago, there's several decades of guarantee of accommodating those of a lower income. And so that easily passes the sniff test. The one thing that we kind of talked quite a bit about with the applicant was in the senior building, you know, what kind of guarantee from our perspective is that going to be occupied by seniors? If you recall, maybe it was yesterday, it was recently, I sent you an email. We did receive some additional information from the applicant. That was kind of a conversation with HUD or someone, yeah, HUD, that they could establish a senior preference for that building. We didn't make it a condition. It is something you could do. It just depends on your comfort level based on the arguments of the applicant. That's the overview. You know, if you have any technical questions about the variance for me, I'm not going to go through each criteria. You have that in your staff report, and I'll go ahead and let you answer or ask any questions of me, and then we'll let the applicant explain what's going on.
Jacob, I have one question.
Yeah.
When the St. Helens apartments, the ones we approved a little more than 2 years ago, they're 3-story buildings. What was the height of those?
They're all within that 35 feet, but they're, I mean, really close. They maximize everything they could.
But they stayed within the 35.
They did. Mm-hmm.
Do you recall if they asked for a variance?
They did not ask for a variance for building height. In fact, I don't recall any variances at all for them.
Okay. Thank you.
What is blocking for bike racks?
Blocking for bike racks?
Yeah. To install blocking for bike racks in the units.
It's in the framing, so when they frame the wall, like you would block it for a grab bar, they put extra 2x6s in to accommodate heavy things hanging on the wall. That's the way I interpret it.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what it was they were.
That's probably right. They in the application they talked about having the core bicycle parking in the bottom floor of this building, and then having an option for wall hangers for any resident in the room who desired it.
And are there stairs going to this basement to park 40 bicycles?
Stairs?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are stairs in the building and probably an elevator as well. But we do have the development team here to answer any specific questions you may have.
Any other questions?
I had a question for Jacob. Because every time there's a multifamily listed for development, I get a lot of pushback in the community. Why are we allowing apartments? Why are we allowing the traffic to do this? And if you could just briefly just talk about the code and how this happens, because it's, you know I've heard your explanation multiple times, but I thought for the record, because the little chat blows up about, what about the intersection? What about traffic? What about schools? And I mean, there's steps that people have to go through to do development. I just thought if you want to put that out there, because people think that I know that in this forum, the chat is not considered a public comment, but because they have to say it for it to be a public comment, they can't just put it in, it's not recorded when they put it in the little chat. But I just thought, because this hearing happened over a year ago the first time, just remind us about the traffic study, remind us about those things.
Sure. So traffic, that's one of the things that gets everybody excited because it affects us all, and we all see it and experience it. And that intersection of US 30 and Gable Road is no angel when it comes to traffic. Arguably, maybe technically, the busiest intersection in the county. So when we have development, especially of this scale, our code requires what's called a traffic impact analysis. And what that does is it reviews current traffic conditions and future traffic conditions without the development, and then future traffic conditions with the development. And it evaluates basically the functional capacity of the system. So is the intersection going to suck or not, and how bad is it going to suck? That's the non-technical way to put it, but essentially that's what it means. So how long do you have to wait there for something to happen? And there's all kinds of numbers that show how it's going to work. And no surprise, Gable Road US 30 blows up in its capacity deficiencies. And the problem with this intersection is there's no incremental fix. It's one big project, and that stupid railroad and the crossing arms make that a very expensive fix to put in some additional turning lanes. But it is in our plans. It's something that we've looked at over the course of many years, including most recently our Riverfront Connector plan adopted within the last 2 years. And in this case, because it is, we can't incrementally fix it, what we can do is collect money proportional to their impact and put that in a fund for improvements later on. And we've already discussed the amount with the applicant. It's a pretty hefty fee in this case. And I might be able to find that if I have some time. So anyways, that's how it works. Do you want me to talk any more, Jenny, about the basics?
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry. I think that the perception is that you have some magic wand and you can prohibit certain developments and you can allow other developments. And that's not necessarily the case, because private property is private property and investment is investment.
Yeah,
as long as they follow the rules, that's the way it works.
Yeah, I can play city planner, and playing city planner, I have some authority, but there's still property rights and things like that. As city planner, my job description does not say God. It would be interesting if it did, but it does not.
Not what I heard.
All right, I think that's enough to start with. I just thought
Okay.
to cover the framework so then they can move on, because for some people, they didn't see part one of the hearing, you know, because we already had a big hearing and squashed a lot of stuff out. And this is kind of fine tuning, correct?
This
This
is why
is
we
just-
have zoning. That's
Yeah.
what zones are for.
There you go.
Okay. Could we hear from the applicant?
Okay, so I'm going to assume that Megan is going to be, oh no, Ian. Ian's the applicant, of course.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Well, I don't have a formal presentation for the board, but I really appreciate you hearing our request. And I'm happy to answer any supplemental questions about either the bike parking or the roof height.
We have any questions?
I had one question in this letter that we received that says community development partners. It discussed in the third paragraph, the elevator building will be designed and preference will be given to senior living. We're currently confirming with HUD about the age of 62 as opposed to 55. I think that kind of affects who might really possibly use a bike. Do we have any clarification on that age requirement?
Yeah, I would ask either if Wendy or Megan could step up and address that. They work more on the financial contractual side. I work on the architecture design side. So let's see if one of them is available.
If you could just please state your name for the record too when you are speaking.
So Wendy, it looks like your audio is not set up. You need to connect your microphone.
Yeah, it's showing the camera icon.
Megan is also unmuted if Megan can answer.
Hi guys, this is Megan Myers. I'm on, but unfortunately Wendy's been the person with this communication. See if she can be heard here.
And now she's frozen.
Yeah, a backup plan may also be to call in. Oh, there it looks. She looks like she's connected now.
Okay. Excellent.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
We hear you.
She's frozen.
Hello? Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I had my phone on.
It's sketchy though.
Wendy, it might be better for you to stop video since your bandwidth is lagging a bit. Maybe just use audio.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm so sorry. Okay, I have unstable internet. That's why I joined by telephone.
We can hear you.
Okay, so if I cut out, I apologize. So this is a co-development with the Northwest Oregon Housing Authority and Community Development Partners. We do have project-based vouchers for this development. Those project-based vouchers come through the Northwest Oregon Housing Authority. The Northwest Oregon Housing Authority requirements are a preference for seniors 62 or older. So those apartments with project-based vouchers will have a preference for people 62 or older. The low-income housing tax credit requirements are based on the Housing for Older Persons Act, which has a requirement for 55 or older. We are currently working with Oregon Housing and Community Services and HUD and Northwest Oregon Housing Authority to reconcile which requirement will be required. So we will either have 62 or older for those apartments that have project-based vouchers and 55 or older for those apartments that do not have project-based vouchers, or the more restrictive requirement for 62 or older will be implemented. The way that HUD has described it is that the more restrictive requirement is what regulates. So we will be proceeding with a preference for our senior building, which is 81 apartments for 62 or older. In our experience with development of senior buildings, the bike parking is never used or is hardly used. And so because our bike parking is in the basement, which is in basalt, we are basically blasting out square footage that will never be used. And so, we're hoping to reallocate some of that funding, for other amenities within the building, like a teaching kitchen for the rest of the development. And so we're trying to use this variance to reallocate some of those funds. So that is really the requirements around the preference for senior living in the senior building.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
It's just bicycle racks at the senior housing.
Could you say that again?
It's just the bicycle racks at the senior housing, not the rest of the development.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a reduction of 40 bike spaces over the 238 total units.
Okay.
I find it hard to believe those would even get used. Sounds like they won't.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. Any other?
Can you talk a little bit about the height request?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So at the time of conditional use, we understood that there was a slope on the site. But as we got into design, schematic design phase and moving into DD, we realized that across the whole 1,000-foot distance of the property, that topographic change is about 30 feet in total. And some of our buildings stretch lengthwise along that distance, and it makes it so that it's, say, the northeast corner of one building, you could achieve the 35-foot height limitation, but across the 100-foot length of the building at the far end, you'd be upwards of 38 feet. And I think based on the combination of topography and the length of our buildings, it presented a challenge. And so we collaborated with the contractor on creative solutions, kind of self-VEing to get underneath that 35-foot. And we came up with the solution of lowering the pitch on the roof to meet that 35-foot requirement. But what we discovered is that the cost of materials to build that construction type increases from a common regular framing method of asphalt underlayment to a very expensive product that is high temperature SAM membrane, which is a very expensive building material. To make it work within the 35-foot height parameter, we would increase our construction cost by an estimated $70,000.
And that is only for one building, is that not correct?
Our assessment is right now that the 35-foot height restriction impacts 2 of the 11 buildings.
And which ones are those, please?
On the plans you're looking at, I would say they are C1 and C2. I don't have the plan up in front of me. Let me.
Yeah, I'm there you go.
Yeah.
Correct, C1 and C2.
Okay. And you're asking for the 38 for the entire building, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Wendy, can I get your last name for the record, please?
Yes, Klein, K-L-E-I-N.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant?
I don't.
Wait, anybody in support or neutral? Jacob?
Okay, so I'm just taking a look here. Raise your virtual hand or make a comment saying that you want to speak in support or neutral per our chairperson. All right, I don't see anybody.
Okay, how about anybody in opposition of this application?
Okay, raise your virtual hand or put a comment if you want to testify in opposition of these variance requests. Okay, I do see a comment, so I'm going to ask them to unmute. This is CS.
Hi, I'm just kind of curious as to where these people are going to shop. Columbia County is already limited on grocery shopping and even parking spaces in the grocery stores, as a lot of the parking spots were just handed over to go deliveries, including a lot of ADA accessible parking spots, which if this is senior, they would be using. So I'm kind of curious as to if you are allowing this many units, where do you suppose they go grocery shopping, as people in our county that live here now already have to leave our county, which takes our money out of the county, to go grocery shopping to provide for our families?
Jacob, that's a good one for you.
Hold on just a second, Russ. Can I get your name, please, for the record?
Sorry, Crystal Sharp.
Thank you.
So I don't know if the applicant wants to take a stab at that. I have heard similar comments, and you know, a lot of economics are driven by demand, and so if there's higher demand, the argument or the theory would be that more retail would be built. Now, I know grocery shopping in St. Helens is not the most pleasant experience. I very much know what you're talking about.
I just have to say, for about 11 years, the owner of this property tried to get a grocery store in there, and there wasn't enough population to get a grocery store in there. So it's kind of ironic, and we might have enough population to get a grocery store now.
I'm just curious if any of the commissioners have actually got on any of the community sites, because when it talks about a new business going in, there are plenty of comments talking about, I wish we could get a grocery store. I wish we'd have another grocery store. But yet we never see another grocery store coming in or talks about expanding or places that a grocery store could even go in. But if you were to ask the citizens, we would love another grocery store.
You're getting grocery outlet. It's being built now.
Yeah, there's a proposed grocery outlet by Legacy along the highway. You would see construction there. They're at least building some foundation work right now.
So there's a.
Oh. Can you just reiterate that this hearing is not about approval of this project? We already approved that a year ago, and we had public testimony then. This is about the variances on the previously approved project. Isn't that correct?
These are specific to the proposed reduction of bicycle parking and the proposed increase in building height. That is correct.
Heidi Oliver asked to speak in opposition.
Yep.
Can we move on to that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Heidi, I'm asking you to unmute. So you should be able to do so.
Okay, Jacob, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, hon. So being a longtime resident, 34 years, worked for the county, retired from Legacy Urgent Care, drove school bus for 10 years here. I'm sorry, have a brain injury, so my filter is kind of not good. But what I want to say is I can stand in line at Safeway and be all the way down the frozen food aisle, and everybody's got to stay 6 feet apart and can't get to the freezers. And that's where I find my best time to talk to people. Being an elected PCP for the Republican Party here in this town, I am fit to be tied. I go to Walmart, can't find nothing on the shelves. Oh, I was there the other day, and the line was all the way to the garden area. 2 checkers. They can't even keep employees, let alone stuff on their shelves. We do not need any more apartment complexes in this town. Our infrastructure was not built for it. And the traffic is already horrible. Have you tried to get out of Walmart? And then you're fighting Starbucks traffic and everybody's trying to get on, you know, go out to get Highway 30? No, it's a clutter, you know what? No, it's got to stop. You guys got to figure this out without selling us short, us, the community, whether we've lived here for a long time or whether we're low in the bucket or high up in the hog. This has got to stop. And trust me, I worked at Legacy Urgent Care and I dealt with all sorts of people. And I'll tell you what, I took care of everybody. Didn't matter what they were like, okay? So this stuff, this is Portland coming. It's that Kate Brown and her stupid ass things that she's trying to push on us. And it's already moved into Scappoose. Trust me, I already know. I know people that live there. They're tired of it. And Longview, oh, let's get that. That homeless camp over there, they've been stealing tires and stuff up Canaan Road.
Okay, Heidi.
Thank
you.
I'm mad.
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it. We've got to get on with the this variance here. So we are, no further questions. Where are we anyway?
We are in testimony of opposition. Let me just.
The applicant's trying to raise his hand.
Yeah, there will be a chance for rebuttal. I just want to make sure there's.
So.
I don't see any other requests to speak. All right.
Okay, time for rebuttal. Ian?
Yeah, thanks. This isn't really a rebuttal as much as a clarification on my earlier point to, I think, Greg. He said to confirm that it was just the 2 buildings. And it's, I just wanted to go back to the better part of my memory. It's not just 2 of those 5 buildings at the north. It's the 2 buildings shown there, but one of them is shown as typical. So that's meant to indicate the buildings next to it. And so what we're doing is we're working with our friends at Lower Columbia Engineers to adjust the topography and minimize the closeness we get to that height limitation. So we believe the buildings C2, C3, and C4 will be lower, but we're massaging the topography as we get further in design.
So you're saying you won't need the 38?
We believe we will not need the 38, but it is indicated as typical, so it may be needed over at C3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Commissioner, have any other final questions? Hearing no further questions of the commission, the further response from the staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral discussion. Decisions. Any other comments?
So I have a question for Jacob. Jacob, on the building height, as far as a variance for that, how much will that set the city's code back if that were approved under the proposed limitations that the developer is looking at, namely that it's only for a small portion of the buildings that are being proposed?
How much will it set the city back?
Well, as far as the variance, I mean, how much of a precedent does that set for future building?
Well, it's all about the merits of the specific case.
Okay.
And, you know, you have to be able to identify that there's some unique circumstance. And, you know, there's a lot that has gone into this as far as it being, you know, an affordable housing project.
Right.
And that's not something that we see every day. We saw it once in my time here, and that was 18 units. This one's a much grander scale. But because we are using the variance as a tool, that helps prevent the precedents. And it's only, you know, 3 feet or less over 35%.
Right.
And that's, you know, 8.5% increase, which, you know, may not even be perceptible to people on Gable Road or US 30.
And it's in an area where, like you say, there's nothing taller behind it that it's going to impede a view or something.
That's correct.
So the other point I want to make, and this is just an aside, the idea of putting hangars in apartments designed for seniors, having them carry their bicycles up a floor. I don't think I've seen very many 70-year-olds carting their bikes on their shoulders. So I don't see that as really legitimate, but I wouldn't stop the variance because of that, because I don't think that many seniors will probably be utilizing the parking space for bicycles.
Yeah, and that was what Commissioner Cohen is talking about, is something that the applicant talked about in their application. I don't think it was discussed tonight, but they had mentioned the possibility of people on request having individual bicycle hangars.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to fly with many 70-year-olds.
But if the variance is approved, that would not be mandated.
Right.
What's getting popular with seniors is electric bikes, and they're way too heavy to hang up on a wall.
That's right. Or carry.
Right. So you want to be able to roll them in. So we don't want to limit them to have a place to put them. I'm planning to get one. I'm over 62.
There you go.
They're fun.
All right, any other questions? Nope.
Yeah, I did not have a bunch of condition fodder for you. There are 4 conditions, which are pretty basic. So unless you wanted to be creative on new conditions or you had concern, if you want to approve it, a motion as recommended in the report would be the easy method.
I don't have a problem with either request, so reduction in bike spots or the height.
With the height. I don't know.
Somewhat. Who's the motion quick draw here?
Your motion. Come on, Audrey.
I was going to say, no one make, so moved.
Second it? All right.
And so I would assume that that motion was approved per the report.
That understood?
We're doing both variances at the same time?
Yes.
All right, I'll second it.
I already did.
Okay. Well, then all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none.
I move that the chairman be authorized to sign.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
All right.
And just for informational purposes, the traffic impact fee is will be around $41,000.
Wouldn't buy a street light. All right. Now we're on to just good old discussion items.
Yeah, no more scripts.
No. I'm done. Okay.
All right.
Did we talk about vacation the last month when they were doing this? That was all separate then.
Yeah, and this body isn't required to review street vacations, but I'll touch on that in the report a little bit about why we're even looking at this.
Okay.
So this is a street vacation recommendation for a portion of South 2nd. That's what our agenda says. This is not a decision that you make. This recommendation goes in our staff report to council. So this site should look very familiar. We're at the dead end of South 2nd. We're overlooking the city-owned waterfront property and the Columbia River here. The applicants live abutting the proposed vacation area. They don't live, but they own this property where my cursor is. And last meeting, you may remember we approved an access variance and also a setback variance for 2 attached single-family dwellings or a development scheme that utilized 2 attached single-family dwellings here. Since then, they've also applied for a lot line adjustment, which will move the boundary between those 2 lots. It hasn't been recorded yet with the county, so it hasn't been finalized, but the preliminary approval has gone through. As a side note, they also went through their scenic resource review, which is a requirement because they're building in an area that has scenic views. So that's also been processed. So this map shows the affected area. It's been a while since you've looked at street vacation, so just quick recap. They received consent of property owners that over about 75%. You know, a big property owner in this case was the city. So all of this was signed off on behalf of the mayor. And that was because in October, we brought this to them at a council meeting and asked if they could sign off as the property owner and then see it at a future later date for the formal hearing. And also at that meeting, they asked for a recommendation from you because this is, you know, riverfront views. And so they wanted to get a little bit more input from you on this particular vacation. So that's why we're here. So the specific area, let me go to the next map here in your packet. I'll zoom in a little bit. So this map shows their proposed new lot line between the 2 parcels. And you can see it's all portions that has not been already vacated in the South 2nd Street right-of-way abutting that property. If you remember from the previous variances, this triangular portion is part of those 2 main lots, and that was vacated back in the late 50s. And likely because that's part of the steep steep bluff. The brown lines here indicate topography lines. And so you can kind of see the edge of the bluff get super steep right where that area is to be vacated. So that's the steep bluff we're talking about. Also on this map, you can see the water line. You know, these maps, our GIS is kind of notoriously inaccurate, especially with older city infrastructure. And so our Public Works City Engineering Department asked for either a specific location for any public utilities that are within proposed vacations or a public utility easement, blanket easement over the first 15 feet here. And that's to account for, you know, maybe the water line extends further, or maybe the sewer line isn't quite where it's shown on this map. So that's something to note while we're on this map. So the South 2nd Street right-of-way is 80 feet if you just go north of the proposal, and it slowly starts to taper down until you get to this property. And it's actually around 40 at the north end, but it tapers down to 0 at the south end for both lots. And so we have, like, I mean, I've never dealt with a situation like this. This is an extremely unusual circumstance where even our minimum right-of-way width standards for a local street are not being met. And so this allows us to consider a different right-of-way standard. What standard do we use? And so our code has this section that allows the planning director and the approval body to weigh a number of different public benefits or public interests in relation to the private benefit of requiring a smaller right-of-way. And so I'm going to go through those now. Let me pull them up here. So I know in your report, in your packet, you didn't have a staff report. This is, we had a lot of things on the agenda, and so this staff report actually got finalized today, and so it wasn't in your packet. This is for the council, but I did want to show this section of the code that allows for a smaller right-of-way width. And in this case, since we have an unusual circumstance, we kind of get to weigh these options when we consider a smaller width. So, you know, backing up quickly, I just want to talk about why we're even considering a smaller width in the first place. So the applicant is obviously asking for this entire portion to be vacated. But when Jacob and I were talking about this proposal in general, we started thinking about this property's ability to access all the way around their property, given the steep slopes and this bluff here. And so if we were to grant the entire vacation as asked, this property would actually be blocked from accessing the front of their property. We know based on previous development schemes that they proposed that access variance along the north property line to get to the garage around here. But that still doesn't mean you wouldn't want to access from the front property, even just walking. And so we started thinking about ways that we could still grant a portion of the street vacation request, but still honor the need to access that southern lot fully. And so that's kind of why we're considering a smaller width in this. So let's go through some of these. So the first standard we look at is just right-of-way width. As I already noted, the right-of-way width is already smaller than our normal standards, which makes this a unique circumstance. The second criteria is anticipated traffic generation. So we know that only 2 attached single-family dwellings would be served by this narrow right-of-way. And we have a section in our code that says, well, if you're serving 2 dwellings, the legal width of access is 15 feet. So that's something to consider when we think about what right-of-way width to maintain. The next criteria is the need for on-street parking. So in this area, given the steep topography, on-street parking just didn't feel warranted, and that the previously vacated right-of-way already narrows the right-of-way allowed for on-street parking. And so that didn't feel like narrowing the right-of-way would hinder any on-street parking, or that it didn't apply in this case. Sidewalk and bikeway requirements. So just north of the properties, this is an important one, I think. Just north of the subject properties, there's an older sidewalk that terminates about 60 feet before this, before the two lots in consideration here. And at the time that they apply for their building permit, staff will weigh whether or not to require a sidewalk construction. And so if they were required, they would be 5 feet in width. So we need to think about that option. If we want to require sidewalks at a later date, we need to make sure that the right-of-way width is wide enough to accommodate sidewalks. If they're not required, if we determine that it's better to collect a fee in lieu of sidewalks, retaining some right-of-way gives us that leverage to require that fee in lieu of, because they abut public right-of-way. So that's what that section's about. We already sort of talked about the placement of utilities. Staff just wants to retain a public utility easement or have the applicant verify exactly where those utilities are and draft a formal easement. If we retain 15 feet or 20 feet of right-of-way, that public utility easement would no longer be needed because the right-of-way serves that purpose. So that's utilities. I'm going to skip the next few because they're not relevant in this case, and just go straight to access needs for emergency vehicles. So the retained right-of-way, and I'm going to go to this diagram here so that you can see what we are asking for. So this should help visualize what we're talking about. Okay, so here's the proposed property line between the two parcels. They were asking for this entire portion here to be vacated. And what we're considering tonight is whether this right-of-way to remain should be 15 feet or 20 feet. Staff's recommendation is to retain at least a portion and to not grant the full width. So because this portion that's remaining is less than 150 feet, for fire access, that's kind of the trigger when we need a turnaround. You know, if a driveway is longer than 150 feet, you've got to provide a way for the fire apparatus to turn. In this case, it's not that long. It's only 58 feet long. So that was something we considered. The fire marshal at the time when we proposed this to him, he was an interim fire marshal. And so he said that at the time of development of these lots, they may consider sprinkling or other methods if needed. But at that time, you know, access wasn't a concern when we were discussing the vacation. So we always look at street trees and whether or not there are existing trees in the area to be vacated. I noted that there might be some trees along here, but that the majority is actually on the triangular portion that is already part of lot 21 and 22, the two lots in question. And so that's not a huge part of this presentation. And then I also noted that there is a shed in this vicinity that's proposed to be removed. It doesn't really have to do with any of this right-of-way, but it's something to note. So, you know, the question tonight really is, what's the appropriate width to maintain? And, you know, we're basing it on those public interests in this section of code. So things like pedestrian access and vehicular access and safety. So I will open it up for questions. This is the proposed conditions. It's really just all about that width. And then, you know, these are just boilerplate conditions that we need to approve the formal vacation. But I'd really just like to talk about the right-of-way width at this point.
Just utilities run down that right-of-way just to those houses, or do they go anywhere else?
Yeah, so they don't need to extend the public facilities to serve those homes. They just need to build private facilities, private laterals.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason for the PUE was because we don't know exactly where that water line terminates or the sewer.
I'm still not sure why they can't, why we wouldn't just vacate the whole thing if there's no public use
Yeah.
beyond.
So the first reason, Dan,
Go ahead.
yeah, the first reason I'll show you, this is the site plan for the access variance that we looked at before. So if this full portion where my cursor were vacated, getting from the public right-of-way even to their access easement wouldn't be allowed for lot 22 if this full portion were vacated, because this section goes back to lot 21. Does that make sense? So this whole section would be part of lot 21 if it were vacated. And so they would be trespassing on lot 21's property even to get to their driveway. But then beyond that, we thought about how if you were just walking to the front of your house from here, you'd be trespassing as well. You'd be walking on your neighbor's property to get to your front door. So even just for maintaining their front yard or dropping off something really quickly, you know, it seemed like it would be a burden for that owner, lot 22, to not be able to access their house from the front.
I think the tough part to appreciate is the topography. Now, if we were part mountain goat, the topography wouldn't necessarily be as much of an obstacle, but clearly we're not part mountain goat. And, you know, when we were looking at it, it's, you know, if you have property, you want to be able to get to multiple sides for maintenance, to access vegetation and stuff like that. And because the points of access are so limited, we felt that one, just to have access to it, as well as potential extension of utilities, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier extending utilities down this minimized right-of-way and less expensive to repair than down the shared access along the north side of that northerly lot.
Can you show this your proposed?
Yes, I was going to pull that up. Yeah, the thought of 15 was that that's adequate for a sidewalk should we decide to require one, and then also a 10-foot, you know, paved vehicular access to lot 22. One way, granted, but
And that's all to just benefit lot 22.
it's it would be public. So anybody on South 2nd Street could walk to the end of their street and then turn around and not be trespassing if 15 foot were retained.
And vacations always have to go with the adjacent property, is that right?
Street vacations, yeah, they go back to the property from which they came. It's a more accurate response.
All right.
Yeah.
Which in this case is adjacent, and normally it's adjacent, but not always.
Yeah.
What a puzzle.
Yeah, and lot 22's new shape, if this were approved, would be pretty odd, because this would be part of it.
I guess the other odd thing is that the right-of-way that's remaining splits their lot up.
So it's already split, which is the funny part. You know, we're not changing that. For lot 21, it's already 2 pieces. And for lot 22, it's already 2 pieces. That was the whole reason they're requesting the vacation to begin with.
So let's say you put the public street right against the edge of the bluff in an angle, and then they would have more of a usable space in front of their lot, rather than having this flat area there's partially flat ground over there, separated by a public strip.
And you've got guardrails and the whole bit that have to go up.
These are attached homes, right? As we saw last month. So they probably will have some CC&Rs for their real estate agreement being attached and everything. Can that be addressed with a vacation that they have access? I mean, who asked for this vacation? They did, obviously.
Yeah, they got all the signatures and they're pushing for the street vacation. Yeah.
And this is why this is why they asked for it.
Their reason was to have contiguous front yard. So to be able to freely get to their other section of private property, which is the bluff, arguably. That's what they stated in their application.
Well, by you putting a paved road through there, that's going to screw up their yard they're thinking they're going to get.
So we're not paving this road. We're retaining public access through this section.
Oh, I thought you said paving earlier. Okay.
What I talked about is potentially requiring a sidewalk as part of the development of those lots. And at that time, we could consider what the adequate, access standard for accessing their easement here would be, paving. But at this point, we're not considering, what type of improvements go on this right of way that we're retaining.
Yeah, I think it's a shared wall agreement, Russ, and not a CC&R.
Okay.
So can you put up your the topography map again?
Is there any reason why the city would ever want to maintain ownership of right-of-way of that property down the road in the future?
Well, I mean, that's the purposes of looking at all the reasons why we use right-of-way. We looked at streets, we looked at utilities, we looked at street trees, we looked at that's kind of the whole purpose of this. That area is not recommended for a trail route. That area is not recommended for, a park. It's not recommended for other public uses in any of our adopted plans.
But at some point, someone must have felt that it was important enough to put it in the city's ownership.
The right-of-way, when it was originally dedicated?
Right.
So, yeah, and I think it's a good point generally to make about the St. Helens subdivision. It didn't consider topography. It just drew lines on a map and dedicated sections of right-of-way. And in some cases, it makes zero sense through cliffs, through valleys.
It's a 19th century proposal. We don't have a lot of those.
What about the public's right to use that site as a viewing area for activities along the riverfront?
That's a public interest, sure, but there's also all of South 2nd Street that is public right-of-way. We're talking about a very small section at the dead end of a public right-of-way.
Essentially, what staff is recommending is a narrow alley which provides limited access. Mm-hmm. It's not about city ownership. It's about making sure this lot and all the owners into the future, into the decades and centuries ahead, can get to certain sides of their lot for maintenance and stuff like that.
Who's maintaining this? The path and the bluff and the whole thing.
Well, the owners who own the property would maintain the bluff, and chances are the only physically improved access is going to be the connection from the driveway on the north side to the road. That's why I say limited access. It's a way for someone to get to that other side of lot 22 without any complexity or question. Yeah, it's a public right of way. You have a right to be able to get through there to do what you need on that side of the property. Because they're attached, you know, going to the north side of lot 22 is not an option because we're not gaseous forms, we're solid, we can't walk through walls. And otherwise, the only way to get through it is along that access easement.
You could angle a little bit right at the edge of the bluff and give them a little bit more front yard, but you won't be able to gain too much, right?
Sorry, I'm lagging a little bit. Do you guys hear a delay in my voice?
No.
No? Okay.
Not
It might
now.
just be my screen. What was your question, Dan? I missed it. Sorry.
So I'm just kind of back on, it's nice and tidy to put this north-south little chunk here because it's easy to draw, it looks like to me. But what if you, and look at the topography again, there isn't a lot of flat room left on what's being vacated, but there is some. Could it just be angled a little bit and give lot 21 more front yard? You still get access to 22.
So
Do you know what I mean?
no, because it starts to get very steeply sloped at the south end here.
Well, sort of like what Dan was saying, if you went, you know, at an angle through there and gave them both the same angle, and then
Wish you could see my cursor. I'm drawing it for you here.
Yeah, are you saying like taper the right of way that we retain down?
yeah, so they each get a vacated parcel. But that was one of my questions. It wouldn't be in front of lot 22. It would be in front of, yeah, this is getting much.
Yeah.
So are you going to require the applicant to do a topographic survey so we know for sure?
No. No, it looks perfect. Do it.
I don't understand the concern necessarily because the fact that the city's not going to maintain anything, they're going to maintain that as their front yard anyway.
Right.
So I think it's
The moot point.
it is adequate the way it's drawn.
And the council will do their own deliberations and there will be a formal public hearing and all of that. So,
Well, the council already talked about this triangular, the little triangle.
in 1959.
You talked about the windows.
It's changes since then. So what do you need from us? Let's move on.
That's what I'm wondering.
What do you want, Jenny?
Jacob, can I interject here for a moment?
Sure.
Some of the issues you've raised about trespassing, I think those could be covered with an easement. Just that lot 21 gives a access easement to lot 22.
Yeah, that works all the time.
Chuck, was there anything else you wanted to add? Or can I respond to that?
Well, I'm not sure what's being served by maintaining the property in city interest. When you look at what
That's not the question. The question is, what do you want from us? A motion?
What we'd like to do is have continuity of the property so we can maintain the property in an even manner. It sounds like the owners of this property will be responsible for the maintenance of their vegetation up to a small portion, and then it's going to have to wait for the city to come in on its own schedule to maintain that small piece of property, that kind of demilitarized zone that's in between their two pieces of property. It just seems like a very abnormal condition that was created, many years ago, and here's an opportunity to cure it.
No, I understand that, but do you want a motion, Jenny? Do you want?
So logistically tonight, we're asking for a recommendation from this body on whether or not we should approve it. So you have options to say deny it altogether, approve it with conditions, or just give them the whole thing and not have
Because I
conditions.
watched Jacob present all this at a work session on the city council.
The only part of this proposal that was presented to council
Was this little triangle?
I think you're mistaken. The council signed off on, as the property owner, to move this to the formal process for public hearing.
Are you talking about the property sale
right
thing from the last meeting we had?
Yes, that's what the.
Oh,
different property.
Can I put something out on the floor?
Yes.
So I recommend that the planning commission, I propose the planning commission recommend to the city council to go along with staff's recommendation.
I'll second that.
Okay. So
we just needed to know what you needed, Jenny.
Yeah, to clarify, is that going with 15 feet as the diagram indicated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chuck, here's the problem, Chuck. We can't reserve private access easements as part of a vacation request. We can reserve public easements. And there's a history of vacations here where public easements versus right-of-way has caused confusion. And having experienced that over the various years, I am very adamant about not creating an easement mess, because then that's something we have to deal with for years to come. So that's going to be a hard sell for staff to get behind.
And just to add context, it was a street vacation with a sidewalk through it with a public access easement, and they put a fence because it was their property through the sidewalk. And so it became a nightmare to enforce and explain.
Not sure this is going to be the same nightmare. It might be a different one, but I'm sure it's the same one.
There's a motion on the floor. And it's been seconded.
Yeah. Russ, call for a vote.
All right, do we have a vote for, was it 15 feet right away to remain? Or 10? 15?
15, yep.
For this vacation, all in favor of that to go to city council?
Aye.
Drawn?
I guess.
Aye.
Aye. Second and?
Aye.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? No opposition? Then we'll go to city council that way. All right. House bill.
Okay, more stuff to get excited about. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, this will not be nearly as long as before. I do want to do a quick overview, though, just to kind of set the foundation. So House Bill 2001, St. Helens is greater than 10,000 people. And so by mid next year, we have a requirement from the state of Oregon to allow duplexes anywhere we allow single family dwellings, and we cannot discriminate duplexes by requiring extra rules with them. As far as counties and cities affected, this is a really interesting map. I like to show it. And that just shows that, well, there's St. Helens, and geez, feeling kind of lonely here. So not a lot of other cities in our rural region. Of course, the Portland metro area has quite a bit of that. When we talk about housing, we talk about the missing middle, and there's duplexes on that end. Zoning wise, there's our zoning map. And as noted a couple meetings ago, if we look at our zoning districts, where single-family dwellings are allowed, there are some differences. In some cases, not allowed or conditionally allowed. And here's a close-up of that, and that's going to have to change to permitted. This is all rehashed, so I'm going through it pretty quick. Now, the council, we talked with the council about this because these are legislative amendments, and I want to make sure that we're working on something that's not going to have to be changed too much, because it is a lot of work. And the council and commission disagreed on a couple matters, and one of the most significant ones was this question here. Those 2 units, should they be in one building, or could they be as 2 detached buildings? The planning commission present at that meeting was unanimous in keeping it as 1 building with 2 units. But the council, although with a divided vote, 3-1 with 1 absence, favored the detached, and that includes the mayor. So if we know that the council, that's the direction the council wants, you know, that's what we're going to kind of work on. The council seemed to be okay with the planning commission wanting to increase the minimum lot size for our apartment residential zone from 3,050 to 4,000. So that is something that we'll talk about a little bit. And because we're talking about 2 detached structures now, I want to talk about primarily distance between these structures. So our code, and I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. I'm trying to work within the way our code is structured now. So our code has terms called yards, and that's just synonymous with setback. And so what we're kind of talking about here is creating this interior yard, this distance between 2 principal structures on a property as part of this. And there's a few things we can do. We can have a tiered system, which is 10, 7, and 5, and that's kind of what we have to show you here. You can just not have any and let the building code figure it out, or you can have a fixed one, 3 feet, 6 feet, and then also consider accessory structures such as a 3-foot minimum separation, and that's actually what we have written in here. So I wanted to explain that briefly. So I remember attending a planner's workshop a year or so ago, and the city of Milwaukee talked about their auxiliary dwelling unit rules, or was it no, it was their cottage cluster rules. And the way they were written, you could have a building that was like 2 feet wide or something. It was ridiculous. So basically they had standards that really didn't work with each other. And so in considering, you know, some of the standards that we're proposing, I wanted to kind of make sure that we weren't doing the same thing. So what I did is I took, in all the residential zoning districts, took the lots based on the minimum lot width, as in this case, and then the minimum lot depth, and made the smallest lot possible given those constraints, and then considered the front and side yards, and then this tiered system that we're contemplating, and just to see, well, does it work? Now, the other thing that the council wanted us to do is the base lot coverage of 35%, which is predominant in all of our zoning districts except apartment residential. They wanted that to increase to 40% as the base. And so that's what this shows. And so what I was trying to do is, you know, can you get 2 equally sized structures if people want to have 2 detached ones, and will the standards conflict with each other? In the case of R10, we're able to get 2 good-sized structures, be within our lot coverage, and have a little bit of wiggle room from our setback. So our 10 doesn't seem like that's a big deal, and that's with this 10-foot interior separation. So 10-foot interior yard for the R10 zoning district. In R7, we're talking about 7, and all we're doing is taking that side setback and applying it to the interior. In this case, you know, we can get 2 equally sized structures and without too many problems. R5, same thing. We even have some wiggle room with our yard requirements. Now, I have 2 of these for the AR zone. One of them is based on the 4,000 square foot, and the other one is based on our current 3,050 square foot. I want to make sure that these are both in the table in case something happens to where we get pushed back on the 4,000 and need to retreat back to the 3,050. And the AR zone is the 50% coverage. So this was interesting because with 4,000, you know, we're able to get 2 good equally sized units and even have a little bit of wiggle room here. But it was interesting when I was looking at the current reduced size, the 3,050, I couldn't really get to the lot coverage, and this may be an argument for that 4,000 square foot to help promote 2 units, the efficiency of 2 units. So that's one question for the commission is, you know, what do you want to do with these interior yards? If you even want to have a standard to let the building code figure it out. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, we have this section about projections into required yards. And this is something we deal with quite a bit. You know, how much can eaves project into a yard and like chimneys and things like that. And some of these are just clarification language. But some of the things I wanted to propose to you, especially because we're talking about 2 dwellings, is currently porches are allowed to extend into a required front yard a little bit, or they're allowed to extend into it. And I got to thinking, well, what about corner lots? So the way this is written is it would that porch projection would be allowed into a front yard or an exterior side yard on a corner lot. And that helps point your entries to the streets, which is something we kind of talked about. There's also this regulation about unroofed landings and stairs. Currently it says front or rear yard only. And in here we're suggesting to include that to the exterior side of corner lots. And then number 6, this is talking about, you know, this minimum 3-foot separation from other buildings and structures, which our code doesn't have. But if we're going to talk about an interior yard, it's probably good to have some minimal standard. And this 3-foot applies to property lines as well. And that's no portion, including the edges of eaves and stuff like that. So these are things I wanted to bounce off the commission as we work on these standards. So what do you think?
I think it's a lot to digest in one night. Do you need answers immediately?
Not, yeah, you know, I wish tonight wasn't as busy as it was. Decembers usually aren't this crazy. I need to have, I need to have our notice to the state by February 3rd. So we could push this to January. I may have to make some assumptions in some of the amendment language.
Is this go to council?
This will ultimately go to council. I did want to try to talk to the council about the full cadre of requirements. And yeah, there's just not a lot of time given the schedule and juggling everything else. If I understand we've been, this has been a 14-hour day for Jenny and I already, and it's been a pretty long night if you're mentally fatigued.
Well, at first I thought you were just going to talk about the separation. I didn't know about all the other little incidental things. And I'd like to look at it as a complete package before I mean, I already have, you know, I mean, why are we even calling it a duplex when they're going to be separate anyway?
We're not going to call it a duplex ultimately. We would call, we would in the code just say 2 detached single family dwellings. The reason we're calling it a quote unquote duplex is that's how the state's model is set up. So for the purposes of the state, it's allowing 2 dwelling units on 1 piece of property. And based on the meetings we had with the Planning Commission and Council, clearly we don't want to call that a duplex because it's just it just confuses people.
So the ADU code is going to go out the window. We won't need it, right?
Yes, the ADU code with this, the ADU code is pointless.
Right.
And in the draft code amendments I have now, that whole chapter is struck.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we can all use some time on this. If we could come back with some more questions, and we have a time frame you want us to work with, other than now.
Well, I mean, I think about it in the meantime, and we can tackle it in January.
You know, Jacob, I'm concerned. Have we thought about every potential argument that this may cause, or when we look at the code as it's currently structured and the changes that this is proposing, is there anything else that could possibly crop up that would be in conflict with what you're now proposing?
I hope not. I mean, I've combed through it. The problem is we have limited time. The state said, you have to do this. And what we don't want to do is be late and have the state model code take over. So it's, you know, we have our backs against the wall because the state says you have to do this. So the pressure's on. That's why for the last several months, we've been working really hard in preparing this stuff and dealing with everything else that we're dealing with.
Well, and I realize that you're working on a time crunch, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that you have everything, all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, so that down the road somewhere you don't find out, oh my God, we made a big mistake, and it opens you up to, you know, some big problems. That's why I think giving the Planning Commission a little time to review it, to look at, I mean, there was 2 commissioners that weren't even at last month's meeting when this was first discussed. So they have to, you know, get up to speed too. So I would like to hold off for a month and take our time and look at it.
Yeah, sure. So just the things to consider are the, you know, do we go with an interior setback, or we just let the building code deal with it? Both are acceptable. And then the other thing is with our exceptions, and the main one where this projection into required yards is currently restricted to the front or rear, such as landings and stuff that promotes doorways and entries and things like that, do you also want to allow that to face streets, the side street on corner lots? And the reason is, if you have two detached structures, you know, you want people arguably to have the flexibility to face the different streets that a lot may be on. So really it's about flexibility, and that's what the state, you know, that's why the state's making us do this. You know, we don't have to deal with the projections into required yards. I'm just trying to find some basic stuff that doesn't take too long to tackle, that will make this stuff work better. So really, you know, these standards are to prevent some of the issues that you're talking about.
Okay.
So Jacob, these are only for standards or plans for 2 units per lot. You kind of mentioned cottage, so we're not talking about more than 2 for bigger lot.
Yeah, cottage clusters, that'll be a discussion later on.
Different kind of thing. Okay, so I want to make sure.
Later this year, some other year. It's in our housing needs analysis to work on it. And if this wasn't such a busy year, we'd probably start working on cottage clusters several months ago. But it has been a busy year. A lot of development, a lot of stuff going on. Development and projects, so.
But it's similar. It's just a 2-unit cottage cluster, you know?
Yeah, really. And some of these things could fold into our future discussion with the cottage clusters. And that's why, you know, this discussion about interior setbacks seemed valuable.
Yeah, the reason I mention that is a duplex that it's attached, it looks like a duplex. This looks like cottages, you know, so that's just what brought that to my mind.
Yeah, so I for the purposes of wrapping your head around this, you know, throw duplex out. It's 2 units on a lot, given the direction of the council. But yeah, if you'd like to table it to the next meeting, that's fine.
I wasn't at the meeting where we talked about attached. I would have said detached myself too. I like it.
So you would have voted for this?
Yes.
Not restricting to these?
No.
But we're talking about, if detached, we're talking about just a vanilla lot, nothing on it. So you're going to place 2 structures. So if you have a city lot that already has an existing structure, you'd probably want to add to it because they're always putting it right in the center of a bigger lot. So that gives them the option to add on to a building and make a duplex out of it.
Yeah, this really is more, it's going to be more feasible for vacant lots, because for that reason.
So is that why before you guys were more about attached lots because they give more flexibility for existing buildings?
Attached lots?
Yeah, attached buildings, I mean. Attached buildings.
I just remember the conversation revolving around a traditional duplex and the commission wanting to see traditional duplexes.
Okay.
But that, you know, everyone can speak up if they want to correct that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the purpose. I mean, it's called duplexes. I mean, if you wanted to have them detached, call them cottages. That's something totally different.
Yeah, we'll get into the definitions once the code amendments reflect it appropriately.
Okay, well, let's all work on it for till next session. Great. Come back with answers for Jacob.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, Bennett Building facade renovation update and recommendations.
Yes, and I will be quick because I know it's late. So, you know, this has been an ongoing saga of the Bennett Building, and I don't really want to get into the history about why tonight, but this is what we've got today. And at the council's meeting in December, about a week ago, we got approval to replace all of the windows. So it's about a $40,000 budget. And we've been working with an architecture firm that specializes in historic preservation, and they've created a full facade improvement plan. And we have phased it into multiple phases because it's too expensive to do all at once. And the first phase, since we knew that replacing the non-historic windows, the transoms, was a priority of the commission, we've done just both windows, both sets of windows at once. Just to touch on them briefly, the other future improvements include replacing broken or damaged tiles and matching to the same color as needed. That would be done at a later date. Replacement of this metal cornice. It's got a lot of dry rot, noticeable from the outside. The parapet wall at the very top has been installed incorrectly. The flashing is not appropriate, so there's birds getting up in there if you've ever walked by it. So reinstalling that, but utilizing the same kind of like terracotta type I'm not even sure the right word, the parapet wall, basically reusing what's there, but installing it correctly. That's part of the scope in the future. And then also later down the line, depending on interior renovations, we may reduce the entry down to one door because the function of this building may not be to have a separate court and a separate water department. That's longer term, and that would all be reviewed by this body at a future date. I just wanted to let you know we have kind of a historic preservation plan for the entire facade now, and that was partly based on this commission's recommendation to do that. So the windows. Council approved phase 1, and the transoms will be replaced with accurate wood replicas that have true divided light. The windows will include textured glass, which is something that I wanted to get your opinion on tonight. The historic photos show that they were not truly clear. And I'll show that here. You can see that the clear glass looks very different than those windows at the top. And so we got a recommendation for 7 different options for textured glass. And here they are. The architects liked number 3, this one, number 5, and number 7, because they were the most period appropriate and they add sparkle. That's what she said. So the question tonight is, do you have a preference? If you don't, we'll just go with what we like, but I just wanted to open that up for discussion. Again, this is just for the transoms. The storefront windows will still be clear glass. And the reason we're replacing the storefront windows, they are historic, but they are not safety glass. And so if someone bumps into one and they shatter, they will break into 1,000 pieces as opposed to a safe break. So while they're out replacing windows, it's just best that we do them all and make them safe. So texture.
I'll start because I have the old glass. I would say that number 5 looks most like what was there.
Okay, this one?
No.
Sorry, it's late.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the middle one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In my opinion, that one looks most like what was there.
Good. Let's go with that.
We'll go with that.
Great.
Yes.
Yes, we're excited. Cool. Any other questions about the Bennett building?
Thank you so much. This means a lot.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're really pleased with Archiform. They've been great to work with. So maybe we'll use them again in the future.
So that one price is for the main glass, the big one, and the transom?
All the windows except for the entry, the actual doors and above the doors, the recessed part, but all the transoms, yeah. And they're removing the old, they're doing all the demo work. That's all inclusive. So
It's only been a year.
Get some money for the flashing work. You don't want water going in the building.
Yeah, I asked, well, not to get into that now, but the threat for water damage didn't seem that great. Otherwise, we would have expedited that to phase 1. And we may be able to do that work in-house.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay, planning, acceptance agenda. No, where am I?
5H.
Jacob, this is the Planning Commission term limits update. This was the new agenda that we sent out. It was emailed instead of mailed because we updated it after we had mailed packets.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if you may
I'm
have
on the
printed.
old one.
Oh, okay, so 5H, update of planning commission term expirations. So as we know, Dan and Greg have both served more than 2 terms. They both wish to continue. Everybody was okay with that. But per our commission rules, we have to put an ad in the paper to see if we can get a pool of candidates. And we did that twice. And then at the very end, we did get 2, and then 2 from the last time we interviewed when Commissioner Pugsley was selected, were okay with their hat still being in the pool. So right now we have a pool of 4 people, and unfortunately, you know, the pool materialized kind of late. So yeah, ideally, the interview committee would have already interviewed these folks, and we could have presented them to this commission and then get it to the council for the next meeting. But hopefully, in the remainder of December, with the remodeling that's going on and all the other crazy stuff we're dealing with, we can get those interviews done and talk to the planning commission about it in January. We want to do the interviews while Councilor Carlson is still here, but the recommendation would be after her term expires. So for Russ and Sheila, we'll be contacting you about interview times.
Okay.
And that'll be something we'll probably discuss in January.
So we'll still come to the meeting, Greg and I, on June.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so please come to that one. We still want a quorum. And then we'll see what happens with the interview committee.
Good. Was that the only, are we on to 6 now or what?
Yep, that was it. I just wanted to keep you all aware of that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Acceptance agenda. Scenic resource review, dead end second. We just did that, right?
Yeah, that was an administrative approval. So those are just, yeah.
And then site development review, Oregon Street.
Oh yeah, the mini storage edition.
Oh, okay. All right, moving on, planning director decisions that we've got emails. Anything there? Okay, activity report for November. Pretty long.
Yeah, and that length is, you know, for many years, the holidays was a time when things slowed down.
It did.
And it didn't really last year, and it sure as hell isn't this year. And I emphasize the word H-E-L-L. And it's not just because it's late. So yeah, it's been busy. And the remodeling on second floor hasn't helped. There's a bunch of office shuffling, and that's really fun too. Ginny.
Would it ever, I didn't know if you guys had talked about this at management team for the new planning or the new public works director to at least be introduced to this body? Is it possible, or is that not appropriate? Because everybody knew who Neil and Sue were, and I just wondered if there was ever, since it's Zoom anyway, that people could actually hear his voice, see his face, and know who that is. I just didn't know. It's not going to be up to me, obviously, because I won't be with you in the new year, but that's a huge, in my estimation of the 8 years on council, that's a huge change. That's a huge direction to make change. And I just thought the more we welcome that person and make them a part of this community, I think that makes us more efficient about working together. That's one message I've gotten from this planning commission for 8 years is we need to work together and communicate more, not less.
Yeah, we're gonna miss you, Ginny.
What?
We're gonna miss you, Ginny.
Well, I just thought I'd leave that little tidbit because the more we work together, the more we can be on the same page and the less things turn into oh craps. So
and that's, you know, that's not a bad idea. We can talk to Mohammed and see if he just wants to stop in and say hi the next time.
yeah, I mean, I know he's brand new and you're super busy, but maybe, you know, maybe there'll be some, you know, a 5 minutes in February or something that he can at least heads up so people recognize him when they see him on the street. Or I know lots of this group is retired and out walking and stuff. It'd be nice if you saw him walking that you'd be like, you'd recognize him and know who he is. You know, that kind of thing. I think that that's one thing that as somebody that moved to this town in 96, we can do better at welcoming people. I do welcome about extending our hand and getting to know people of all different walks of life from all different places and be more inclusive in our community and more inclusive on how we work our government. And I think that starts with leadership. And it starts, you know, each of us plays a role in welcoming new people. That's just that's my tidbit. You can do it or not, because I won't be here to bother you about it.
But this is the hidden agenda item is our advice to
well, you know,
Carlson.
The too funny item is somebody actually asked me in the community, asked me why I didn't apply for the 2 open spots. It's like, no, I don't think they want me to be interviewing because Dan and Greg have served their time. And the voters have spoken. And it's time for me to take a break anyway. Burying my mom, divorcing my husband, and surviving cancer twice in the last 4 years. I think it's time for a break.
And you've been through us for some pretty heavy stuff.
I know, but like I told John and I told Matt, I said, just because I'm not elected doesn't mean, you know, historical memory. Even when people leave, I still ask Bill Amos stuff, and he's been gone for how long? Because there's institutional memory that is important. I know Jacob has a drawer of all the stuff that happened prior to him coming here, and he's like, I think I'm to the back of the drawer. Because you got to keep track of all the precedent and all the arrangements and the easements and all that stuff. And it's important that we have that institutional memory to protect our citizens, to protect our city. So, but I will miss, you know, this group is quite a, I don't take it as an insult, the little island of misfit toys I've spent the last 8 years with. But it's just, you guys are all so different. It's just, it makes the team better when we're all different. I'll miss Catherine. I'm sorry she's not here tonight. So I will miss, I'll see you guys out walking at least. My little dog walkers in my neighborhood. And maybe I'll see you at the Capitol when the COVID lightens up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss all the holiday concerts this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally once a month I was seeing Dan at the Capitol. It's like, well, because we go down there, they do entertainment at the Rotunda at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And so he was on his lunch walk. So I was always seeing, it's like, I go all the way to Salem and I see Dan Carey. So.
Can't get rid of me.
But it's been super fun. It's been great to see what an asset Jenny has become for our city. That, you know, she came here as a rare person. Wasn't it rare? Yeah, she came here as a rare person on 11th month commitment, and she has raised millions of dollars for the city in grant money. and change the face of this community for a generation.
Jenny, this is about you. I'm not
Right, but-
leaving.
No, but it's the team. I think you guys all make it more fun
No.
to do it. You know,
Yeah.
you all make it more fun. You know, it's like just watching everybody change over the course of 8 years, because this is a whole different group, whole different
Yeah.
team than what I took over for 8 years ago. Happy trails, no more splash parks.
Do you know who will be getting to replace Janine?
I have no idea, because it was a weird thing that I was here for 8 years. It was a weird thing because normally new counselors get planning commission for their first 2 years and then it gets switched out. And I got parked here and never got moved, which is fine by me, because the longer you're in planning, the better you know what's going on and the better you're able to answer questions and the better you're able to understand government. It's definitely a good place to start learning about how government works and how it doesn't. But the community's lucky to have such a good team.
We're gonna miss your wisdom.
Yeah, well, my number one criticism is that I was too nice. And it's like, I have to sleep at night and I have to see people at the grocery store and I have to see people at the park and not want to hide, you know, I don't want to hide my car in the back, you know, so nobody knows I'm there. But like I said, it's like, I might still see you at Plymouth Pub when they open back up. Be time for,
Okay.
you know, beers and I don't know, maybe somebody will make a bratwurst in this town one of these days.
There you go.
So, but you guys have a good night and Merry Christmas. Here's
too.
to the end of COVID.
Yeah.
When do you get to move in, Jenny?
I don't know, because I thought maybe February. This is the house that took 2 years to build. And
Yeah.
so I thought maybe February, and then somebody let it slip that they're trying for the end of the year.
That's what I thought. You just don't have a dishwasher.
Yeah, she said it was supposed to be there this week, but you know how everything always takes longer? I
Yeah.
noticed that the driveway got paved,
Yeah.
so that's good, and the fence got done, and my dad and I were over there putting up wainscoting on Sunday. He's 86, and it's like my 86-year-old dad that lives by himself because my mom died a few years ago, and he's like, he's willing to do anything to get out of the house. I go, aren't you afraid of the COVID? And he goes, I go where I want. Is that what older men say? Is they say, I'd go where I want?
Yes.
He goes, I wear
Yes.
my mask. I go where I want. I'm not spending my last year. If this is my last year of life, I'm not spending it at home by myself. I go where I want. So I thought, wow, he's kind of bossy. Anyways, well, you guys have a happy holiday and be safe and be healthy. And here's to getting back to life as normal in the new year.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Here,
We'll
here,
see you
here.
around town.
Have a good night.
All right.
Have a good Christmas.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, next regular meeting, January 12th. Any other items? All right. We adjourn the meeting.
Great. We'll see y'all next time.
Quick
Okay,
question.
have a good holiday.
Don't
Why
forget to work on our
over the
Happy
homework.
holidays.
Why did we skip over the
I don't know what that was.